Elaine, we're live in 13 seconds. Hello, 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 hello. Hi, everyone. Hi, Elaine. Welcome to day 2 of the Special Child, Special Needs Parenting Summit. We had such an amazing time yesterday, and we also have another great day in store for you. I just want to say good afternoon, good evening to those who are on the stream. I don't know if there are some good mornings, but because I know we're being streamed in 18 countries from around the world. The summit, as some would have known, started yesterday with a bang as we look at self-care, as we began with understanding that as parents and those who are supporting the individuals with special needs, that it is important for us to take care of self, because if we don't take care of self, then we are not able to take care of anyone else. I'm your host, Christine Stapley Banks. I am the founder of the summit, or I would say co-founder, because I had a lot of able partners in planning, one of whom is on the screen. I am the parent of a child with cerebral palsy, proud parent of a child with disabilities, and I'm the founder of the Nathan E. Banks Foundation. I'm an author. And this is a way that from the Nathan E. Banks Foundation, we have been seeking to help other parents to raise their voice and to be supported. So in this moment, I'm going to invite Elaine into the conversation to just add her voice of welcome. Mike.
No.
Hearing you now. There you are.
Gosh, wow. Right, these things happen. Yes, it's wonderful to be back here on this absolutely extraordinary parenting summit for another evening as we support persons, parents, families who are, I'm not even going to say challenged, who are being encouraged about how to facilitate their lives to be more, to be better, to be different, to look at the power and the possibility that is accessible in even those situations that look as if they are really extraordinarily challenging or difficult. And I think this year, 2020, Christine, has given us that ability to really see that in the darkness there is a light, and it moves and it shifts, and we
Yes.
are called to be powerful in the space of knowing that that which we are is more than that which is occurring, and we're so grateful for knowing that and for living from that reality.
Yes, yes. And well said, Elaine, as usual, because when we have, for those of us who are raising children and we're raising children with special needs, there is so much perceived stress. There is so much of the not knowing. There is so much of the feeling of hopelessness. There is so much of the feeling of being overwhelmed, that we focus on that, and that we forget that there is all of this great capacity that is within us. We forget that there's even a child that is sitting beneath that special needs, because we have been programmed by society and by how a lot of times our children are presented to us to see the this, that we miss the ability.
Yes, yeah,
And
that's
so,
yes,
yeah. And so
that's
this is a
awesome.
moment, this is a moment for us to just really pause. I'm going to ask our producer to put up a picture, because I just want to show Nathan when he was 2 years old. And it is now that I'm actually seeing what a beautiful young man he is and was
Wow,
at that.
what a cutie pie.
But I never saw that
Yes, yes.
I never saw the joy, I never saw the brilliance in his eyes. It took others coming alongside me to shift
Mm-hmm.
my vision and to
Mm-hmm.
help me. And it was a friend, she's no longer with us on this side. And one day she said to me, what is Nathan doing? And I'm like, oh, Nathan is not doing this and Nathan is not doing that and therapy not working and I can't find this and I'm frustrated. And she just said, hold up, hold up, hold up. She said, I didn't ask you about his therapy. I asked you, how is your son doing? And I really had to stop because up until that moment, I didn't think about him without thinking about the challenge. He
Mm-hmm.
was masked by the challenge. And that is why, for me, embracing the universal principle of people first language when we talk about disability is so important. So we don't talk about the autistic child and we don't talk about the Downs child or the CP child. We talk about the child with CP or the
Mm-hmm.
child with autism because it was such a difficult point for me. And
Yes.
this was a cutie pie who was in my house. I missed that because I was so caught up with the trying to fix him and the trying to and feeling that he was broken that I missed the sheer beauty of just him being,
Mm-hmm.
and so, I'm sorry, I just had to get there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's really powerful. That's really inspiring and encouraging, I'm sure, for many of the parents who might be in a similar situation with a young child, So
Yes.
thank you, Christine. Because one of the things we need to get to, something was said yesterday, which I thought was very instructive because somebody was reminding us that in our culture, well, we speak about Jamaica, but I think there are similar issues in the Caribbean and Latin America, that the children who have other abilities are often hidden. And that many parents will not say if they have three children and one child is differently abled, they might actually say they have two children so that that child is not presented in the public domain or in the public space. They're not seen. And that was really extraordinary for me to get, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So if a family is existing like that, if they are choosing like that, then it means that you too are being impacted. The persons with capacities and with abilities are also, you know, limiting their own capacities and abilities.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that. And so, what a powerful way to open day two
Mhm.
of our conversation because today's theme is looking at strengthening families and
Right.
reclaiming the conversation
Yes.
because I believe that we have lost sight or perhaps we never had the sight because there is what is called the medical model of disability and the medical model sees the disability as something that needs to be fixed, something that needs to be cured, something, and it translates to us parents as something that is probably damaged, something that
Something
is
that is
broken,
wrong.
something that is
Something that is
wrong.
wrong.
That's how the medical model, and not that it is wrong because it serves a purpose in helping us to
Mhm.
understand what support the child needs, but how it is presented to the families, it needs to be coached differently. And
Mhm.
so there is that model of disabilities. And one of the things that I actually love is that the United Nations, which has championed and spearheaded the International Day for Persons with Disabilities and the Convention of Rights for Persons with Disabilities, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the week, that they have actually gone ahead and established that the disability is no longer with the person. The
Right.
person doesn't have a disability. The disability is about accessibility. It is about the inability of the individual to access their environment. And so we take
Mhm.
our eyes off of the person talking about them being disabled, and we begin to talk about access for individuals with,
Right.
with
Right.
these, different diagnoses and conditions.
Yeah.
And so, as parents, we need to educate ourselves because I have had to educate people around me about how to receive my son.
Mhm.
And that is one of the takeaways that we want parents to leave with. But anyway, let's move right along. Elaine,
Do you want us to talk about some of the persons who will be presenting for
yes,
today?
yes, and we're
That
going to invite them in. Mhm.
yes, so we're gonna be in our keynote conversation, which is right about now, and we want to include Center, who is our other co-host. Hi, Center. How are you? Is your microphone open? It looks like everybody is here. Wow.
Yes.
What a good looking set of people, man.
It is so
All
good.
right. So we're going to be welcoming our panel of Dr. Kathleen Van Antwerp, who is the Executive Co-Director of Full Circle Consulting Systems Incorporated, and Executive Director of the Ventura Country Child Abuse Prevention Council, Robin Ryan, Coordinator, Certified Project Manager, and Parent Leader. And we're also welcoming Dr. Raymond. Is it Hype? I hope I got that right. Senior Specialist for Special Education, School Health, international speaker, and consultant on AT and sensory needs. Welcome. So we also, who have I left out?
So we have
Are
some
we-
parents, some special
Ah,
parents. Each day of the summit, some special parents receive a golden ticket to sit in the inner circle of the meeting. And so today we have Mr. Gregory Hugh Glasgow, who is a parent of a child with special needs. We have Audrey McCollum, who is a parent of a child with special needs. And I believe there's somebody else in the waiting room. We have a guest who came back from yesterday, Beverly LeBlanc. She can't stop talking about the event. So she has found her way back today, who are here to share with us in the inner circle.
yes, well, it's wonderful to have us all together on what is really a very important inaugural event. I haven't yet consulted with Christine to find out if this is going to be annual, but let us see how this one works out, and then we can proceed. Back to you, Christine.
Okay, so I am going to now move us into our first session. And the first session we're looking at is actually the theme of today, which is strengthening families, reclaiming the conversation. But everybody, you know me, know I'm a storyteller. So I have to start with a story. So in my book, and one lucky person is going to get a copy of this book today, there is a chapter, chapter 9, that is dedicated to the woman I'm getting ready to introduce. And it's the title of the chapter is You Are Your Child's Greatest Advocate. And so Senta Green she wears many hats. She is an influencer in shaping policies nationally and internationally, in really shifting our vision, shifting our eyes around how we see children and how we see children's development and how we create systems. But how long ago was that? Sentence a very long time, 2008, right? When I was at the place of wanting to give up, and I'm going to teach you a little Jamaican today. So I don't know how, there are many ways that we say, I am frustrated, I'm done, I'm finished. In Jamaica, there are two words or two statements that we use that you really know somebody is at the end of their rope. Me can't bother. Can anybody try that on the stream? Me can't bother. No? There you go. Right. So it means that my hands are, I'm just done. And then there's another one, me wash my hand. Mm-hmm. And it means also that I'm done with it. And that's where I was at that place. And in desperation, because the alternative was, do I just give up and just accept that this was what was going on in Jamaica? There are no services, no support. My son can't get to school. Or do I try to do something about it? And so when I looked at my baby, I decided I was going to try. And so I reached out on the internet. And to cut a long story short, I came across this phenomenal woman who, from the first day I met her, I felt like I've always known her all my life, who could finish my sentences, who was able, when I was naming my frustration, was able to coach it back and help me to understand the emotion that was behind what I was feeling, helping me to know that it was okay and that there are other parents who were feeling the same emotion, and then helping me to see my power in terms of my voice as a parent. She always says to me, your voice has power. And what really cemented me to her was a motto of her organization, Full Circle Consulting Systems: to touch the heart of a child is to touch the soul of a nation. And so I am just so profoundly pleased that Center continues to partner with us in the work. Her contribution has been significant in helping to shift some of the policies that have taken place in Jamaica. And her full bio is in our workbook. So if you have not yet received a copy of your conference workbook, your summit workbook, you let me know so that I can send that to you. So I'm going to invite Center into the conversation now, and I'm going to ask her to say a few words because Full Circle is also a partner of the summit. And then I'm going to give her the task to introduce Dr. Van Antwerp and Robin.
Oh, wow. I get enjoying that. First of all, on behalf of Full Circle Consulting Systems, Inc., we just want to extend our gratitude for being here today and being able to hold space with each and every one of you. I'm looking at the Zoom space right now, and I see some familiar faces that I would be remiss. I may not go on without acknowledging the people that are in the room, especially Miss Elaine Went. There's a lot of history and a lot of gratitude for the woman that is emceeing or co-facilitating with Christine, the breadth and depth and the knowledge that she brings and what she's been able to import into my own life. And I can only imagine what it's been like with you, Elaine, from yesterday flowing into today. Wow. And then to be able to hold space with Christine once again and maximize all the good work that you've already done. We just want to uplift the excellence and the advocacy that has already taken place and extend our contributions to this summit. I am in deep gratitude because I'm looking across the other participants and looking at the screen and knowing that you have come here today for a reason and with a purpose. And so I'm honored to be a part of this experience. I will briefly share a little bit about who we are as an organization, and then it would be my joy to introduce Kathleen, who is going to be my co-facilitator for the keynote, and what we say, my partner in crime, which is a good thing. We'll elaborate on that. But Full Circle Consulting Systems, Inc., briefly but thoughtfully, is an international consulting firm that specializes in 3 critical areas. The first is the science of child and adolescent development. The second is strengthening families. And the third is transformational leadership. And we typically do this work in many arenas, from education to membership organizations and to law enforcement and through juvenile justice outreach. So that's just a little bit about who we are. But what we really came to do today is do what we always do, and that's really to honor the voices and the lives of the parents that are in the journey with their child. We're here to strengthen, to uplift you, to inspire you, to keep your quest going, and to make sure that you walk away with new ideas, strategies, and insights, and equally important, to claim the power and the beauty of your voice. So with that, a heartfelt welcome to everyone who I can see on the screen, and for the hearts and minds that I know are joining by looking or listening in. So on that note, thank you so much, Christine.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So we're going to jump right into the first session. We just welcome Beverly LeBlanc. And before we do that, Beverly, I invite you to just share your experience from yesterday. She has been blowing up my phone with her, just thoughts and her excitement for what happened yesterday. Sound, we're not hearing you.
Is that? No.
Yes.
Go again. No.
Oh, we're not hearing you, Bev. So we'll bring you back in a little bit later, to sort out the audio because we're not hearing you. Did I see Sasha Hill? Sasha? Sasha is on screen. Sasha is just one of our super parents from Jamaica who started a super parent support group. And while I'm not in Jamaica, Sasha is also carrying a lot of the work of the Nathan A. Banks Foundation. And so she is on the meeting with us today. So, with that said, Center, we're now moving into the keynote conversation, and I now hand over, for the next 30 or so minutes to you, to move it from here.
Wonderful. So as we begin this process, I just want to take a few moments to, again, briefly but thoughtfully introduce the co-facilitator. This is a unique experience because typically when you do a keynote address, there's usually one voice,
Right.
there's one mind, and there's one opportunity to listen to that one person. What's really beautiful and powerful about today is that you get two minds, you get two voices, and the opportunity to listen to two. And there's something very powerful and beautiful about that because we get to share this wisdom with you, and that I get the joy of being able to do this with, I said, my partner in crime. We do a lot of deep work with law enforcement around the United States and across many countries. And so we always laugh when we're with police officers and they get it that she's my partner in crime. But in this context, I just want to say that I'm very fortunate to wake up every morning and get to do the work that I get to do with this lady. And I look forward to what we will bring and the experiences and emotions and the thoughts that our information will evoke. So again, my name is Cinta Green, and this is...
I'm Kathleen Van Antwerp.
And together we are the co-executive directors of Full Circle Consulting Systems, Inc. We are here in a very magical and beautiful way. Christine, thank you so much for putting on the Parent Summit and bringing so many great voices and talent and expertise. And I'm so thankful that we anchored today's keynote in a very powerful way through a title that is Reclaiming the Family Conversation. And that's where we want to begin with you today, is this notion about reclaiming the parent conversation. And the best way to begin that conversation is to center our thoughts on the most powerful, the most amazing, and the most important people for this whole conversation. And for all of you, we're going to center our thoughts on our children.
Mm-hmm.
So as we move through our time, I'm just going to ask if I could be the co-host so that I can bring up our PowerPoint and we can begin this journey and process with you.
And while we bring up the PowerPoint, we'd like to invite you to find a picture of your child in your home or on your iPhone. And so while we're waiting for this PowerPoint to come up, we invite you to bring a photograph, whether it's on your iPhone right next to you or whether it's somewhere in your home, and put it right next to you during our time together. So as Cinta said, we're focused, we're united, and we're putting all of our mindful energy into those that we love.
Mm-hmm.
We also want to point out that we're starting with a theory that we call the blue mind. And the blue mind is the concept that when we are in, above, near, next to, below, or listening to water, water creates a sense of mild meditation. And it's the antidote to anxiety or stress or frustration. So we like to always start our presentations inviting you to enjoy the blue mind. And it's also a methodology for you within your home. You can always sit by water, or if you don't have a swimming pool or a resource, you can get a little fountain and put that in your home. And it's good for your children as well. To get everyone centered, we invite you to look at our screen, and each one of the slides will invite you into a mild meditative state so that you can feel that heartbeat within you and you can feel this soul-making moment together.
And as we're bringing our children into this space and we're taking on this blue meditative mindset, we want to begin our conversation with you with a very beautiful quote that will bring up emotions, thoughts, and perspectives about reclaiming the conversation in your story. And the quote goes like this: to my children, if I had to choose between loving you and breathing, I would use my last breath to tell you that I love you. So just take a few moments and think about that. To my children, if I had to choose between loving you and breathing, I would use my very last breath to tell you that I love you. You'll hear us talking today about reclaiming the story, and reclaiming the story begins with reclaiming or claiming the lives of our children and understanding their presence, their existence, and how that is the driver for what we advocate and inform others about who we are as individuals and who we are as families. So the first thing that we want you to do, the reason why we asked you, bring a picture of your child into this space. One is because we want you to feel the love and the energy of your child. And equally important, anytime you go into a setting or a meeting, especially if your child is not with you, think about bringing a picture of your child to the doctor's office. Think about bringing a picture of your child when you have to have an educational meeting. Think about bringing a picture of your child when you're going to a parent conference, because it's a way to anchor and focus the energy and also tell your story and help people to remember that your child is not a number. Your child is not a case, your child is a child. And so we offer this two ways. One is a strategy, and equally important as a way to bring your child into the space. Kathleen?
It also demonstrates everywhere you walk that you are your child's advocate. You are the one that uses your voice, and when your voice is tired, you have resources and connections we're going to talk about today that will strengthen your family and strengthen your voice. So we invite you to bring that child of yours or children of yours, family members of yours, into this space as we move forward to reclaiming your family story and strengthening your family through the 5 protective factors.
So here's a question to think about. And again, we're going to move through this process because we want to engage you intellectually, we want to engage you socially, we want to engage you emotionally. So what do you love most about your child?
Oh.
Asking everybody who's participating in this experience, what do you love most about your child? Is it his eyes? Is it her smile? Is it the way that she makes these long vowel sounds that only you understand, but it warms your heart every single time you hear it? What is it about your child that you absolutely love? And we're asking you to pause on that because this is an incredible process and part of claiming the story and the narrative of your child. What do you love most about your child?
In addition to asking you what you love most about your child, which for so many of us that it's overwhelming, there's emotion and we can think of many things. But we also want to take you down a path today where we want you to authentically talk about what hurts your heart, breaks your back, and keeps you up at night. We want to engage in some real conversation today so that you have a space to love your child all the more because you're able to communicate and articulate what hurts your heart, breaks your back, and or keeps you up at night.
One of the things that we know about claiming our stories or reclaiming our stories, and you'll hear us going back and forth with these two terms because many of you that have gathered in this space may already have fully activated and you know your story. And then there are many of us that may be joining the space for the very first time, and it's a reclaim of our story and who we are. We want to give you a couple of thoughts and ideas to think about because every thought, every choice, every intention is marked by the stories that we share and the thoughts and perceptions that we have about our lives and our children. So what is your family's identity? When you really think about who is your family, how would you describe your family? How do you offer your family to the world? What are the joys? What are the strengths? What are the struggles? But who is your family? Oftentimes, if we do not claim who our family is, there are other people that will claim it for us. So we're asking you to take a few moments and think about who is your family?
And while we're asking you to think about it, we know that Christine's objective is that you leave this summit with tools, with information that will lead you forward in strengthening your family. So grab a sheet of paper, grab a pen or a pencil. And as we walk through some of these questions about reclaiming your family story, go ahead and make some notes. Draw a flower, a tree, a sky, whatever it may be, but let yourself flow into the moment and answer what you say matters. What do you want for your child? What do you want for your family?
And the other thing is trusting that the answers to these questions are not outside of yourselves, that they're housed within you. Often there are different scenarios and narratives that are often told about who we are by other people. And we're saying, no, look within yourselves for the answers. For families that have children with special needs and disabilities, we often, Christine and I have talked about this at length, that we often may give our child over to a service provider because we are seeking help, we're looking for support. And often we allow other people to begin to tell us about who our child is and the types of supports and services we need to be accessing and looking for. All those things are incredibly important, but here's where we're signaling and ringing the bell, looking within yourselves for the answers. And that takes a moment to understand your seat and your power as a parent. And let's think about that for a moment. Your seat and your power, meaning your voice, and Christine, you started the conversation this way, your voice has power.
Mhm.
Your voice has incredible power. And the other part is avoid being spectators in our own lives. And again, that is reminding us when we're in need of support, we often relinquish parts of ourselves because we may feel that we might be desperate. We may feel that we don't have the information that we need to have. And so we relinquish parts of ourselves to other people. And we're saying to you that that's not something that has to be done. We're here to strengthen and to pour into our lives, and everything that you need, you have. I was listening to Elaine earlier today, and she said, love the life that you have. Love the child that you have. And that just really, it shook my soul and helping me to remember in the moment, I'm not going to relinquish the power of me, and I'm not going to relinquish my child over to someone else. I can seek, but I do not have to fully let go. And that's something that we want to continue to remind everyone that's viewing and part of this conversation. Be involved in the conversation and remember your voice, remember your role, and remember the love of your children. And Kathleen, can you talk about the piece regarding intentionality?
So being here today, being present, registering for this summit is intentionality. You came forth engaging. You came forth, like Senta said, and we're here to support, we're here to engage, we're here to share with one another. But being intentional means that every day that you wake up, you're going to love your child in their development the way they're doing their development. And you're going to seek the support you need to find the strength you may need more some days than others. But throughout the time that we have with you, we invite you to be intentional. So lean in, listen, take notes, engage, and think thoughtfully as we move forward. We're going to move into the concept about all kinds of minds. And what's important for us with all kinds of minds, and I know, Senta, you're going to jump in as we do, but we want to bring forth the idea that we are all developmentally different. That's what makes us so uniquely human. And so to love your child and meet your child where they are. And we do understand that at times children need diagnoses and they need someone to say, this is what you're dealing with and how to work with it, but also to demystify the challenges by saying, every child is a unique human being, and the way that they develop and grow, while human development helps us understand ages and stages and milestone development, not every child's going to do that the same. So we want to demystify challenge. We want to accept and see where our child is, know that they're unique, and recognize that all kinds of minds and all kinds of lives, families, and children are different. And exactly how your child and you are in the world is exactly where you need to be.
I love the idea that you're talking about looking at this unique aspect of our children and who our children are and the unique capabilities and information that they bring. This is something when you talked about demystifying challenges and looking at our individual children, I want to talk for a moment about labels and the roles that labels play in actually clouding our capacity to be able to see our children as our children. And when we talk about the labels, I want to share and reiterate something, Kathleen, that you just brought up, is this idea that there's information, diagnoses can help us understand our children. But what we really want to sound the alarm on is that it does not have to define our children. And that's the critical aspect that we want to land our thinking and our actions around, that the labels provide information, but the labels do not have to define the essence, the capacity, and the ability of our children. And so as we move through this time together, keep thinking about those unique and powerful qualities that your child brings. And let's talk about demystifying the challenges and see the challenges as an opportunity to grow, to innovate, and to be inspired, and not to be shut down and challenged by the information. And that's something that we really want to spend some time thinking about. How do we change this narrative? How do we shift our mindset? How do we shift our heart set? How do we shift our tool sets to be able to advocate for our children in the way in which we need to? So demystifying, honoring our uniqueness, and valuing that there are all kinds of minds.
Mhm. Mhm.
We'd like to introduce you to a medical practitioner who has spent the last 40 years of his life working with children and families, strengthening children and families, demystifying challenges, and letting families meet themselves exactly where they are. But he has this really interesting tool. We want to introduce you to what Dr. John Horton calls the wisdom system. And to put it in a really comprehensible way is to say that when we look at the development of ourselves and our children as humans, we have different systems. We have the digestive system. And when we understand how our digestive system works, we can help strengthen our digestive system. We have our reproductive system, our immune system. We have all of these different systems that work through our bodies, and medical doctors help us all the time try to understand, how does our system work? How do we help our child learn about their system? Dr. Horton introduces to us something called the wisdom system. And in basically the wisdom system is saying that from the time we come into the world, we have the capability to tap into our soul code, tap into that system when we might get upset, anxious, afraid, nervous, frustrated, and teaching ourselves and our children to stop and use certain methodologies to tap into our own wisdom system. And the wisdom system brings our life back into balance.
Mhm.
So we're going to introduce three terms, because when you talked about bringing our system back into balance, oftentimes there are three things that typically tip or create this imbalance within our system. And so think about fight, flight, or freeze. Think about when you are faced with a challenge or something that is incredibly difficult. The science says that there are three ways that humans typically respond. We either fight the situation, so we either push back with our words or with our body because we do not want to take on what we're receiving. It could be new information about our child that we think is not in alignment with how we see our child. It could be information in regards to something that you're hearing for the very first time, and your body and your mind is responding to it, and you want to push back on it. That's the fight piece. The flight piece is when you want to escape. And sometimes this is not a physical escape. It could be in your mind. I don't like what I'm hearing. I want to escape the situation. I want a different alternative because I don't feel safe, and I don't feel connected, and I don't feel that I'm being regarded in this moment. So I want to flee the situation. The very last one, and this is based on the literature of trauma, when adults and children have experienced trauma, is that there's a freeze pattern. And a freeze pattern is, I'm so overwhelmed in this moment, I can't even find the words to speak. I can't find movement to get up out of bed. I can't find the defense to actually fight my way or to resist what it is that I'm experiencing or hearing. We introduced this because these are three real terms. Dr. Horton has offered alternative ways for us to think about the fight, flight, or freeze. And when he's offering alternative means, he's saying that we can also look at this inner process within all of ourselves. And that inner process is the wisdom system that Dr. K has talked about. He introduces two concepts. He talks about stability and he talks about shields, and that our body naturally has what they call the homeostasis process. that when things are not in balance, our body naturally wants to put things back in balance. And so that's the piece he's bringing forward in regards to the stability. And then there's the piece that he talks about that is called the shields. And a way to think about the shields is a methodology that he refers to as STOP, STOP. And those are the pause points in your life that you could actually stop feeling the frightening freeze that you're experiencing. Elaine, I know you talked about this at length, and not only did you talk about it, you moved people through an experience to get in tune with what your body is saying. What is your body saying right now in this moment as you're receiving information about your child? Why are you responding this way? And opposed to being afraid of it, opposed to getting angry about it, how can you lean into it and get curious? How do you begin to ask questions about what is happening? And so we offer this as a system because what I love about it so much is Dr. Horton said, we have a digestive system, we have a reproduction system, but we also have something called the wisdom system, and we all have access to it. So as we're talking about reclaiming our story and reclaiming our lives, a lot of this work in order to advocate for yourselves and for your children, you have to have the capacity to take care of yourselves so that you have the capacity to take care of other people. And that's what we want to introduce to you and where we're going with this concept of a wisdom system.
It lends itself again to intentionality, Senta, what we spoke of so much earlier, to reclaim your family, reclaim your lives, know your story, advocate for your story is intentionality. And so we don't have control over the stress system. That may just show up, but we do have power and opportunity to develop our wisdom system to balance that. So with that, we want to introduce to you strengthening your family using the 5 protective factors. Longitudinal research has demonstrated that these 5 protective factors help build up family strength, resiliency, and unity. And we know that there are many, many ways that you can use your hands to love and care for your child. You can use your hands to feed your child. You can use your hands to hold your child. You can use your hands to soothe your child. But after we introduce you to the 5 protective factors, we're going to show you a way to know, learn, remember, and implement the 5 protective factors by just using your hand, simply using your hand.
So the first factor that we want to introduce to you is this concept and experience called social emotional competence. And one of the ways that we look at social emotional competence is looking at a power word called coping. How do we cope with our daily life experiences? And one of the things that we're going to introduce is how do you teach your child to cope with his or her feelings? What is that process? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? When a child is upset, we always say that behavior is a form of communication, and it's part of our role to figure out what is this child trying to communicate, why they are upset. A lot of times children are not just upset because of something that is happening in the environment, but it's also a way of thinking about how they cope, how they process the information, how do they make meaning of the information, how do they communicate that with other people, and then how does the person that they're communicating respond back to them. Each time we slow down the pace and look at our children and acknowledge where they are in that moment, we are communicating to them their capacity. We are communicating to them that they have the ability, and we're also showing and modeling to them how to process those feelings, whether they're verbal, nonverbal, whether they're ambulatory, non-ambulatory. It doesn't matter what the need, what the situation or the condition is. We always speak to our children as if they are fully in tune and engaged. And let's think about that they're fully in tune and engaged, regardless of what the diagnosis is, regardless of what the moment is. And this is the piece that we're offering around social emotional competence. How do we teach our children to cope with his or her feelings?
The second protective factor that we'd like to share with you today is once again exactly why you're here and why this summit is so important, is knowledge of parenting and child development. So reflecting on what are some of the things that you've had to learn as a parent and how did you learn them? And most and many of it is with experience, but also with conversations, research, learning, connecting. And as we've said all along, these 5 protective factors each hold so much important strength within them. So we want to continue to encourage you to do what you're doing today. Seek information, share information, give information as you learn it as a parent. So reflect on your own knowledge of parenting and child development. Reflect on what are some of the things that you've had to learn and how did you learn them? And then most importantly, reflect on how can you share what you've learned with others to help strengthen their family in this arena.
Let's land in the space for a moment about sharing with others, because protective factor number 3 is something called social connections. And the idea around social connections is, aside from family members, who's that significant adult in your child's life and how does your child benefit? So think for a moment, and this is where Kathleen and I wanted to take a moment to pause to not only think about it, take a few moments to make either a mental note or write it down. Who's in, there's a brilliant woman by the name of Dr. Brene Brown. If you haven't heard from her or heard of her, her work is brilliant because she talks a lot about the power of vulnerability, and that vulnerability historically has been seen as a sign of weakness. When in actuality, when you think about the moments when you've had to be vulnerable, that's when you called upon your greatest strength and your greatest courage. As a mother of a child that is a cancer survivor, I remember having to have conversations that really hurt my heart and they broke my back at night. And I remember thinking, I'm going to keep my pain to myself. I'm not going to reach out and pick up the phone and call Kathleen. I'm not going to reach out and pick up the phone and call Elaine, because I felt if I were to do that, then I'm being vulnerable. And with that vulnerability was a symbol or a sign of weakness. When in actuality, once I picked up the phone and said, Elaine, will you pray for me? Christine, will you sit with me? Kathleen, will you talk with me? There was a social connection, and it gave me permission to release and be able to share what it was I needed to share. Dr. Brene Brown talks about as one of the greatest and most enriching things we can do in our lives is to step out on faith, step out in courage, and actually demonstrate what it is that we need to someone else. So in other words, what's your social connection? Who's in your square squad? Who's in that little box that you know on any given day, at any given time, I could pick up the phone, I could text a message, I can send an email, I can go on to Zoom, and I can get some level of support and connection. And we're asking you to think about it because once you have transferred it to your mind, it's easier to activate that and pull that forward in time of need, in time of celebration, and in time of trials and tribulations. So take the time and think about who are you socially connected with, and equally important, who are your children socially connected with?
And I want to thank you, Cinta, for sharing a very specific example of how this protective factor was so critical to you in your life. And when we go through these 5 protective factors, what we're going to do in the closing is we're going to reiterate each one. We'd like you to choose which social protective factor is something either you need or something you're very good at. So we really want to make this user-friendly. And Cinta, I love that example that you gave, that when you were a mother of a child going through a cancer and being a cancer survivor, you really had to find your social connections. And we want people to find their social connections for themselves, for their children, for their significant other. It's a very critical piece. So thank you. And we'll have everyone reflect as we go. Well, the next protective factor happens to be the one that impacted my life the most as well. And concrete support in times of need. Cinta already talked about vulnerability, and vulnerability equals strength, and it equals an opportunity to strengthen your family. When your family is going through a rough time, how can your children be part of the solution? So often we're so busy providing and taking care of and moving from space to space to make sure everyone around us, before we lay our head down on the pillow at night, has had concrete support. And yet sometimes children themselves can be so amazing during times of need. This one was particularly important to my family when 2 years ago we lost everything in totality to a California wildfire. We lost 30 years of our lives. We lost everything we ever knew. And in an instant, we were standing on the street with nothing but the clothes on our back. And at that time, we redefined almost every word in the alphabet, or in the dictionary, I should say. Strangers became family, family became friends. People took us in and people lifted us up. And as Senta said, we had to find the strength. We're very independent. We take care of ourselves. We had to find the strength to ask for resources and to accept resources. And I remember having a day when I was just overwhelmed, and it was what broke my back. And I remember laying down and crying uncontrollably. And when my 15-year-old daughter, who had lost everything as well as I, came into my room, she looked at me and she said, "Okay, Mama, you're strong. I know what you do. You take care of people in the world." So she said, "You can lay down today and cry, but you got one day. And then tomorrow, I want to see you get up with me, hold my hand, and let's go take care of it." And it was an amazing, amazing concrete support. She let me know what she knew about me, what she knew about resilience, and what we needed to do together. And it was my child that came to me. So we want you to think about not only the people, the community, but your own family and children, and find out your concrete support in times of need and accept it. Ask for it and accept it.
So glad that you brought forward, which I knew you would, in regards to your personal story. And we want to remind everyone that is listening, our children show up and they do what Kathleen's daughter did in a lot of different ways. Even when a child just knows to put their hand on your lap, or if they grab or stroke your face, or they move in closer to you, there are so many ways that our children express what Kathleen just shared. And here's the part that we must pay attention to, is that how do our children, how do they do that? How do they do that? How do they know, like when they hear their brother or their sister crying, even if they don't have the words to share or to express, what do you notice differently? Do they begin to cry? Do they try to move in a little bit closer? There's so many signals, and if we're not paying attention, we can miss them. But it's the piece about the concrete support in a time of need, which parlays or moves us into this place of resilience. And resilience is the word that keeps coming up to me today when I landed on the Zoom meet, and where I'm leaving right now, is this idea about power. The word keeps coming. And resilience is something that is a power word. And resilience is not something that we are born with. It is something that we activate through life experience. So when we talk about parental resilience, here are a few things we're asking you to think about. What are some important life lessons you have learned that have made you a better parent? You know, think back in your memory bank. What are some of the days where you thought you weren't going to make it, and surprise, you woke up the next morning and you made it? What are the things when you thought, I cannot find ways to communicate or connect with my child, and now you have tools and strategies and ideas about connecting with your child? What are some important life lessons that you have learned, maybe when you were a first-time parent, in relation to now being a second or a third-time parent? And the reason why we're asking you that is because the things that we have drawn upon from the past is wisdom and information that we could use to draw us into the future and help us to bounce back and bounce forward when things are difficult. Another question that we would ask you to think about is, what's great, what is possible, and what is my opportunity? So when things are challenging, can we look around and say, you know what, the challenge is upon me, but let me look and see what's great. I have life right now. I have breath right now. This is a possibility. This is an opportunity. So we're asking you to just think about these 5 protective factors, because they truly, as Kathleen, you shared earlier, they're an opportunity to create this level of advocacy, this sense of ownership in our own lives, and an opportunity to be the voice for our children as we continue to navigate these journeys that are sometimes quite challenging, and that other times they draw smiles upon our faces, because we know that we have met the challenge, and yet the road still lies ahead, that there's more to come. So keep thinking about these 5 protective factors. And Kathleen, I could tell there's something that you want to share. Go.
What I'd like you to do, Senta, is I'd just like you briefly to go back to the first factor, and we're going to show them how to use their hand to remember the 5 protective factors as they leave our time together.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the first protective factor. And I'm going to ask you, if you're here on Zoom or in your living room, wherever you may be, if you can hold up your hand. We're going to start with your thumb. Your thumb represents the first protective factor because thumbs up is one of the first ways we learn to communicate our emotion. So when you're thinking about social emotional competence and how to teach your child, think about how many times a day or how often you've given each other a thumbs up. The second protective factor we want you to think about is your index finger. Your index finger is representative of knowledge of parenting and child development because you are your child's number one teacher and your child's number one advocate. So the more you learn and the more you share, the more you know how to love, live, and be with your child. We're going to go to the next one and we're going to put up our three fingers like this. And we're going to say the middle finger represents social connections because we really never want it to stand alone. I hope you get it because I can show you. I'll let you have a visual imagery, but it'll make you laugh. We always have to bring humor into our day. So the middle finger is social connections, how important and significant it is to be surrounded. The next finger is going to be our ring finger. And the ring finger represents parental resilience because first you must have a commitment to yourself in order to take care of, love, and be strong for your family. As Senta mentioned, take care of yourself and have this resilience so that you can move forward for your family. And then, Senta, can you go to number 4 and 5? There you go. And sorry, I had flipped them. And number 5 on my chart here is your pinky finger, because it's the smallest finger and we all need support in times of need. So we really hope that today in our time with you, these 5 protective factors can be remembered by the way we use our hands to praise, to love, to support, to lift. And now when you're walking through your day, you can think about the 5 protective factors and what they may mean in the life of your family.
And we leave you with this final quote: the sign of great parenting is not the child's behavior. The sign of truly great parenting is the parent's behavior. So on that note, Kathleen, I love the way that you close. So give us a word of wisdom as we tie up this piece and we transition back to Christine.
Thank you, Senta. And the word of wisdom that comes to me today through all of you and seeing you is connection, connectivity, belief, resiliency, and just the unity. Christine, you and your team have unified so many beautiful voices for children in this Parent Summit. So we thank you. It is an honor for us, Full Circle Consulting Systems, to stand united, to partner with you, and we look forward to doing this with you on many, many occasions to come. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. I have been just moving back and forth and looking at the messages are blowing up. So someone said that the protective factor, they have no social connection. Someone says that only themselves and a sibling and a teacher, there is nobody else. Mm-hmm. And, I'm going to ask you ladies to talk about that, but I just want to say that sometimes there are more people there than we know, but we're not even present to the fact that they're there. And then there are people who don't know how to help us. So unless we are willing to be going back to the word, to be vulnerable and to ask, then we don't know what support is just waiting in the wings to see what it is that they can help with. Garcia says, I learned that when kids are having meltdown, discipline isn't always the answer. Sometimes that can trigger a longer, bigger meltdown.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I got from what you were all saying was very important. I want to go back because it came up in a conversation I had earlier with Christine today when we were checking in for the event. And I was reminding her again about that cultural phenomenon of shame. And I think a lot of people of color or different races have this memory of being shamed. And it's a very difficult thing for persons to get over and to ask through the shame, you know, to step into the shame or not, to recognize that being ashamed is not the truth. Being ashamed is an unconscious choice that is not healthy or helpful.
Absolutely.
And so what I really, through Christine, am hoping, and through all of us who are here today, that we can be a stand for persons diminishing and disrupting shame, so
Wow.
that you can ask, so that you can say, I need some help.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And why I was able to say that was just reading something from Christine's book, where she took Nathan to school, and the school said to her, we don't know how to teach this child. You have to tell us. We've never done this. And so in searching for answers, she bucked you up. Literally, that's a Jamaican term. She bucked up center. And here we are.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Elaine,
Yes.
I just really quickly, because what you're saying is so important from the work that I've done for myself and walking hand in hand and holding parents' hands as they were hearing for the very first time about their child's diagnosis or having to navigate systems, like Christine so eloquently said. And I want to draw back to something that you shared because it's vital. That shame piece can really have a devastating impact and immobilize people from doing the very thing that we're talking about, which is claiming and reclaiming our story. And what you're saying right now in this moment is that in order to get to courage, you have to walk through vulnerability. So I love that you're disrupting, you're dismantling, you're interrupting and offering another way for people to think and perceive their life experiences. And we get to be the designers and the writers and the narratives of our story.
And the beautiful and perfect thing is when you have the courage to do that, you discover that on the other side of shame, vulnerability is joy, ease, power, confidence, and truth.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Kimberly says that I can benefit from a social connection where persons experience similar issues. And Kimberly, you're in the right place.
Yes.
There are many people inside the meeting and people inside the live stream who are walking a similar journey. And so we encourage you, you have a workbook. And in the workbook, we have created sections of the workbook where you can actually make notes. So as you talk to people on the stream, make connections. We have 18 countries. And I wanted to just run through the countries: United States, Trinidad and Tobago, the Bahamas, Nigeria, Suela, actually Nigeria, Dominica, Jamaica, Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, Belize, Guyana, India, Bangladesh in particular, Ghana, Ireland, Australia, Cairo, Egypt, Budapest, Hungary, British Virgin Islands, St. Vincent, Kenya in the African continent, and Indonesia. If you don't hear your country and you are here, just represent and drop your country there. But what it is connecting us to is that the same way I am feeling I need social support, people on the stream are feeling the same way. And so you have been brought into this place. So I usually walk in and say, hey, I am me, who are you? It's usually my opening statement. And I remember the first time I sat in a session with Elaine and she asked me the question, who are your social support? I thought I had none. And I had these wealth of people around me waiting, but don't know how to enter into my story. And so I had to learn to sit and process me to understand, what do I need in this moment? I need somebody to keep him so I can sleep. you know, who is willing to do that and to ask. And all of a sudden, I find that a lot of help began to come my way. So that actually leads us, and we have some business to take care of, some people who are winning some prizes. And Senta, I'm going to ask in a moment for you to share about the masterclass from Full Circle that somebody will win today. But we are going to move right into the next session so that we can keep going, where we're going to invite Robin in, and Senta, I will ask you to do that introduction. But the next topic that we're going to touch on, and Dr. K, you spoke about it earlier, what hurts your heart, breaks your back, and keep you up at night. I want you to think about that for a moment. What hurts your heart as a parent of a child with special needs, or as a family member, or as a teacher, or whoever is working with that child? What hurts your heart? What breaks your back? And what keeps you up at night? In my book, Raising Nathan Every Life as a Story, I call that, and again, you're going to learn another Jamaican, I call that my ball out. Because it's when I just poured out all of the emotions that I had. And I talked about how in the middle of the night, my husband was at work late, in the middle of the night when I lay down and I'm left alone in my thoughts and sleep eluded me. In those moments when people are calling, the phones are ringing and you're not answering because you're in those moments just trying to cope, to deal. And I remember Senta called me and she said, oh my gosh, when Liberty was diagnosed with cancer, I had those moments too. And many of us as parents are still going through those moments. And we're not finding any space to process them. And so this question is to now get you into practicing that vulnerability that we talk about. To be able to write on paper, you have your workbook, get a sheet of paper and just process that, because that is a part that begins the process of healing, that begins the process of bringing clarity to your journey, to give you back your joy. Because I'm here to tell you, I love my son to bed, and he is just the funniest little person ever. But I had to be processed in order to get to that place of joy. So when people ask me, I did an interview today and somebody asked me, how is Nathan? And I get that asked a lot from people I don't know. And I said, oh, he's loving school and he's thumbing up and he's charming off everybody. What the person was asking me was if he's walking. But I no longer even respond to that, because that's their story, not mine. I'm talking about who my son is in this moment and how my son is, but it took me a while to be able to process that. So I'm going to invite you back, Senta, to just share about the giveaway first. Then we can introduce Robin, and then we can now move more fulsomely into that session.
Wonderful. While I'm pulling up some information, I'm going to actually pass it to Kathleen, who's going to introduce the masterclass and the wonderful opportunity we have before us in the parent raffle.
We're very excited. Full Circle is extremely excited to support this Parent Summit with an opportunity to continue and further your own education. It's education/entertainment. It's an opportunity for you to find what brings passion into your life or someone in your family. Masterclass is a year-long subscription to an educational online virtual learning opportunity that every class that's taught is taught by someone considered an expert. Maybe it's your favorite writer, maybe it's your favorite chef, maybe you like to dance, maybe you like to sing, maybe someone in your family or your child likes to paint. Whatever your passion may be, and you can use it for yourself in those times where you do need to find space and breathe deep, you can give it and share it with those you love within the comforts of your own home. So what it would be is a 1-year subscription to an educational/entertaining social or so what is the word I'm thinking of, distance learning opportunity that comes right into your home. And once you get the subscription, from the time you register, and registration information will be included, you have 1 year from the day you register. You can go onto the website as often as you like. You can go 1 time a day, 3 times a day, 4 times a month, whatever works in your life. And you can research and learn about all different opportunities. It's not just in any specific arena, that they have experts and celebrities and accomplished people that have done really cool things that they want to share. And since this parent summit is about sharing and social connections and learning, we thought this would be a great opportunity to share with you, the lucky winner, a 1-year subscription to entertain and educate yourself. And you don't know, you may find some very valuable information you never thought was out there by some very intelligent and exciting people who want to share with you.
Wow. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. I almost feel to say, can I win it? But no, that wouldn't be fair. We're going to give it to somebody else. And so I just want to, in this moment, just share that a parent wrote to say, I got access to the summit and I'm watching it. Thank you so much for bringing awareness and understanding to a global challenge that we all need to be mindful and aware of. And so I just want to say thanks to that parents for sharing, and we will continue to share some others. I also wanted to share that we have today, we're going to announce the winner for this masterclass today. I don't know how to choose because there's so many parents, but we also have a prize from yesterday, 1 complimentary art therapy session for a family of 3 to 4 persons, or 1 complimentary art therapy session for a child. And we're going to announce that winner as well today. So yeah, so we are now into the next session.
Excellent.
So Santa, you're
So here we are. I want to take a few moments because I think it's incredibly important to introduce another voice that is going to join the conversation right now in regards to this next session of where do you go? Where do you turn when information or life experiences hurt your heart, breaks your back, and keeps you up at night? So Christine, would you like for me to go ahead and introduce?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it is both my honor and my joy to extend the voice right now. You heard from Kathleen and I. We're going to bring another voice into the conversation. And this voice is represented by the brilliant, talented Robin Ryan. And Robin, if you could just wave or say hello so that people know who you are, that would be wonderful.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
I want to share a little bit about Robin. I'm going to do this in 2 ways because there's the part of the professional bio that's part of the workbook. I won't go in great detail, but I will highlight some excellent examples of the woman that you're going to hear from. But I also want to introduce her from a personal standpoint because of what she represents to me and what she represents for the state of California for many families that have turned to her, and that she's been instrumental in shaping policy, but also bringing the voice of family members to life when critical decisions have had to be made regarding other people's children. So with that, I'm going to say Robin Ryan is a coordinator of a special education training and technical assistance project under the State Department of Education in the state of California. She's been supporting statewide initiatives and systems of support for families of children with special needs for at least, I've known her for close to 2 decades. So I know she's been doing this for a while. She is a frequent speaker, trainer, presenter. She contributes on so many levels to the policies and the work that happens on boots on the ground, working directly with families, as well as working at the local level and then working throughout California to bring voice and vision to what we call the family voice. And so I want to say that she has ran support groups on behalf of family members for a really long time. She holds a credential. She's a very organized woman. I wish she could be with me as much as possible because project management is a skill and a knowledge base that has served her incredibly well, and also on the projects that we've been able to partner on. The other thing I'll share with you is that Robin momentarily will introduce herself from a personal space in regards to maybe telling a little bit about how she ended up here with all of us today, and a little bit about her own journey personally and professionally. But I do want to say something that's incredibly important to the dialogue and conversation that we're having right now in this moment. And as all of you reflect on where you are in your life and where you sit in whatever country, whatever space, Kathleen and I are big proponents, along with Robin, that the family voice it has to be heard. It cannot be denied, it cannot be dismantled, and it cannot be interrupted. And because of that vision and that belief, Robin has held really strongly to this idea, even in situations where people wanted to hamper the voice of the parent or they wanted to dampen it. And she is unapologetically courageous in saying, no, the family voice will be heard. And so for that reason and so many others, I have a tremendous amount of respect for what she brings and the journey that she has navigated. And so it's with great honor and pleasure, for lack of better words, although I think those capture it beautifully, that we get to now share this space and have a real conversation with each other about navigating the experiences of being a parent of a child with a disability. And then for Kathleen and I to lean into the conversation with you and Christine from the perspective of how do we hold space as professional support providers as families are navigating their journeys. So on that note, Robin, welcome as we share this experience with Kathleen, Christine, and the rest of the people who are joining.
Thank you very much, Senta. Wow, that was quite an introduction. And at this point, did you, Christine, want me to go ahead with what brought me here, or?
Yes. So that'd be the first question. What brought you to this place?
Okay. Yes. Sure. Again, thank you. And just following with what Senta shared in the beginning, when you all said, get your phones out and get your pictures. Well, although my son is down and around the corner, I did do the same. So there he is. So I had it right sitting over here as you were talking. So thank you for that. Again, thank you, Christine, for inviting me into the panel and the warm introduction sent, of course. So I join you today primarily as a parent of a young man named Gabriel, who hands down is my favorite person in the whole world. So Gabe was a preemie and diagnosed with cerebral palsy around 9 months. And so I became immersed in all the available programs and supports. When I started working in this field, he was about 1.5. And so it wasn't because I knew a lot about disability or parents, but it's because I was learning to navigate the medical and educational space myself, which had a lot of moving parts. And so I wanted to learn more about how those parts fit together and then share what I learned with others. So when my son was very young, I was offered an opportunity to share my perspective and experience. And since that time, I've been fortunate to be in professional positions the last 20 years or so, where I've worked and learned alongside many amazing parents and professionals, such as all of you here on the Zoom call, and in the field of special education, parent involvement, and family engagement. So working through the local family resource centers, facilitating a mom's group for the last 20 years, and working in technical assistance projects, both state and through our county office. But working in the field has helped me get a better understanding of my own situation and learning about what could be possible for my son. So from infant programs and learning how to partner with the school district from preschool all the way through high school, and through a fully inclusive experience for my son, and then what's possible out there in the community. So you'd asked what brought me to the work, and for me, the work is it's personal. And when I came to this work, I was learning about preemies and cerebral palsy and being a single parent. And now my son is 25 and we continue to learn together. And my son is in a place where now he shares his experiences with others. And so watching that continue on as we do that together is really pretty special.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And so I'm going to open up the question now to the audience and to the panel. What hurts your heart when you think about your child? You know, I was told last week when we had this conversation that asking the 3 questions at once can be a little overwhelming for parents. So we just want to just go through, when you think about your child, when you think about your experience, you know, whether or not you were in the hospital experience, which was a trauma for us, and afterwards, whether you're getting services or not getting services, whether you're in school or not school, when you think about it, what breaks your heart about your child? And I'm just going to give, you know, any one of our parents right now on the link who wants to, you know, share for a couple of seconds, we'd welcome that.
So I'm looking at Sasha and Hugh and Audrey and wondering what are their thoughts as they're listening, and what are you feeling? What are you thinking?
So as we wait on them, Vanetta says, it hurts my heart to think I am the reason my son has autism.
Wow. So that's a big silence right there. So I would really love, Santa, I see you.
Because I had to take breath on that.
Yes.
The real power and beauty about all of us coming together is that, again, we have the power of 2, we have the family voice, and we also have professionals on the call. What just took my breath away by what you shared, Christine, is that I know that that is a burden and a perspective that many family members share. And I also want to lift up, I don't know the parent's story, I don't know what her narrative is, but I do want to lift up that that's something that hurts my heart and it breaks my back as an advocate, and helping to shift the language and the information and the research so that parents begin to understand and know, especially with the history of autism, there's no need to point fingers and place blame. There's no need for that. And so I know you extended it to the family member, but when you read that, I had to take breath as a responsible advocate and a service provider to say, no, there's no need. Your emotions and your feelings are real. You own them. They're yours. I can't take that away from you because that's your experience. But I do want to lift up the body of information that helps us to understand that once upon a time, we were blaming mothers. That was the history and the narrative. And sometimes we don't have access to all the new information depending on where we land or where we live in this world. But I do want to offer the fact, and I'm hoping someone else will speak to this, that the research is very clear now. There are lots of variables as to why autism exists. And it's no longer the finger pointing to the mother that it is your fault. And so I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because it lifts our eyes to the evidence and the information and the progress that we have made. So I offer that. Elaine, that's the only reason I had to kind of grip my heart for a moment. And I to respond to that. Those are the types of things that break my heart, you know, that keeps me up at night and that hurts my back, because I want to interrupt and dismantle that kind of thinking, not from the parents. But what are we doing as professionals signaling to other parents that we're pointing the finger for blame? We have to stop.
Yes. Lenora says it was always you're being paranoid. It's your anxiety, only to find out that there was no such thing going out about him. Orain says it hurts my heart the way the nurse speak about my son on the day he was born.
Yeah.
As a father,
please.
The name is Hugh Gregory Glasgow from Guyana. What hurt my heart was the fact that when my daughter was born, no one could have really guide me and tell me exactly what it was. We tried to find out from the doctors exactly what was the type of disability. It wasn't until like about 2 years after that, we found out that she was suffering from cerebral palsy. And that really somehow impacted me. But eventually, um, I was able to, having got the kind of information through an organization, the Ghana Community-Based Rehabilitation Program, through one of their volunteers, that I really then began to understand as to how, as a father, I can really begin to cope with this situation.
Thank you for sharing
Awesome.
that. Thank you for sharing. And so we pretty much are hearing the things that hurt the heart. And as we also know, some of the things that hurt the heart also break the back. Because when we think about our children with special needs, especially within the context of the Caribbean, where a lot of the support, the occupational, the physical therapy, a lot of the equipments that are needed are not available to us. So we have to do physical lifting. I remember a parent said to me that she doesn't take her son out because he's 16 years old and she has to lift him like a baby on her hip to take him out because they don't have a wheelchair. And even if they had a wheelchair, she don't drive. And she says people in her neighborhood were saying it's another Jamaican word is worthless. The boy is worthless. Why he won't walk? Because there is such a low level of understanding about a disability and about what all of that means. And as a result, we go back to that shame that people talk about occurring, where a lot of times you just don't know what to do and you're backed up. So there are a lot of things that, break the back, hurt the heart. Some of the other things that came forward, we did a poll from parents, including the fact that they have to care for the child. One gentleman yesterday wrote from the UK to say his son is 6 and he's not potty trained and he always soils himself at what dad calls an inconvenient time. So there are a lot of things that fall into that category. So I'm going to ask us now, as we move through the session, to just weigh in terms of Dr. K and Center and Robin, just weigh in on what are some of the things that we can share with parents as resource for how they can shift, disrupt this way of being. Not that it doesn't happen and it doesn't exist, but how can that be, repurposed, relooked at, transformed?
Christine, I'm going to lean in for just a minute. And I think it goes back to one of the 5 protective factors that you mentioned is not always available to everyone, which is learning more about human development and learning more about child development, because the science has continued to evolve and it really helps us understand developmentally where children may be. We can see children who are typically developing, children who may be what they call atypically developing, and it can help parents feel that they have some resources and some tools. So I know on, Christine, your website and through this summit and through the resources, I really want to lean in, because everything you're saying that breaks your heart and breaks your back is very valid and authentic. It's why your voice is so critical, but we want to continue to encourage you to do all that you can to learn as much as you can, so that you will understand some of the myths about a parent being at fault, or some of the myths about a child being seen as worthless. Those are myths, and those have been changed as the science has grown and evolved. And you are all parents who were chosen for a very blessed reason to be the love and the advocate of these children. So keep educating yourself in this area of science.
Thank you for that. Galen says, I stay up at night and watch my daughter sleep, asking God to spare her life to see her grow up. That's part of what keeps her up at night. Monique says, what hurts my heart when I think about my 8-year-old daughter who has autism, that she's not able to tell me what she thinks. She's not able to share her feelings or even call me mama. I'm tearing up on this.
Oh, yeah. This is the realness. This is, Christine, what you wanted this day to be about, this space, holding space for all these really, really important voices.
I see
and
Sasha
providing support.
Nodding, but I'm encouraging her to open her mouth and be present in this space. Sasha, I'm looking straight at you. I need you to speak. Put your voice in the room.
All right. Thank you, Elaine. Hello, everyone. I'm nodding because many of those stories really apply to me. And many of those things, I remember what Christine shared earlier about the gentleman in the UK saying that what broke his back was really the child not being potty trained. And I experienced that. And that was a challenge for me for many years. The soiling, at many inconvenient times, we would be out in public and the comments that would come, and a lot of times it would be challenging for me hearing those things, trying to go through the struggle, trying to understand what was challenging for my child with autism. And trust me, it was seriously a challenge until I met Christine and started to learn more about these things through the Nathan Ebanks Foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And there
my
is
connection is
there
still
is
good. Are you guys still hearing
we're hearing
me?
you. Yes, ma'am. We are. There is a willingness that we have to have as parents to step across that learning. As you spoke about, Dr. K, so ably, the masterclass. I want to share with parents that it will take some work to develop your voice, to develop your skill to read. But I sit here as an example that it is worth it.
But in the moment, one of the things we have to facilitate is the trigger that opens the mouth. So I'm going to practice what I just practiced with Sasha on Audrey, who has been responding and who has been twisting her lips close every time she feels, there she goes again, every time she thinks to say something. So Audrey, I am the trigger for your mouth to open now and share with us your experience. I look forward to that.
All the experiences that have been shared here, and I'm kind of tearing up because I remember how hard it was for me just to find a school initially to place my son, because when I started out with him at a nursery, he was in the home space for a while, and then I had to find somewhere to place him, and it was so difficult, and persons were, oh, this child is all over the place, we can't keep him, and it was very frustrating. So for me, what really hurts and keeps me up at night is just to, I don't know, because as a parent with a child with autism, you really, hope and pray that you could find a quick fix to resolve the issues, but it just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And and my son now is in a space where he's proceeding now to high school shortly, and I wonder, how will he cope? How will he be able to transition? Because these kids, they come under a lot of judgment, a lot of ridicule, and so that is what hurts me the most. Being sometimes feeling powerless, helpless, just to support them enough. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Robin, our center, you want to respond?
Robin, would you like to? Okay.
Sure. I can add in. Definitely. So for me, when I think about what breaks my back, it is as somebody mentioned it a little bit earlier, which was there's a physical perspective of it. And for me, there's a lot of carrying. There's equipment that's bigger. There's bath chairs and toilet supports and therapy equipment and all these things. So there's a lot of heavy lifting, but families I've shared with share the same thing. And so it does take its toll for physical ailments for those families as well. It can be difficult as kids get older because they're heavier and maybe you're not as strong. So definitely that whole notion of taking care of yourself comes into play, which is easy to say, not always easy to do. but things that keep up at night can go along with what hurts your heart, as Audrey was explaining. I think some of those things, it goes in different phases. I think when the children are moving through their ages, but not necessarily in the same milestones as others are. And so experiencing that, I know for us, experiencing going through school system, we moved through, and it was very important to us to be fully included in school and have all those great experiences. But then, and it wasn't easy at all, but that's what we fought for and pushed for. And so we were able to do those things. But then, when you reach the milestones of graduating and moving off to jobs, and some folks move out or go off and do what they're doing, not all of those same experiences are available to everybody, right? Depending on where you live or how supports are. So even though there are some fantastic programs that are out there, and supports and programs, I'm excited about those things, but they're not in everyone's community or in everyone's town. And so that can take time to work through. It can be upsetting and disappointing for your child or for you as a parent. And I think many parents often wonder what's going to happen when my kid gets older, who's going to take care of them. Lots of questions. And I can just say that, you're definitely not alone in thinking that. There are many on this call right now and out there. I hear it all the time. And I would like to say that, just to offer that what we do and what we've done in our family is to just take a situations one thing at a time. You can think about all of it at the same time and become very overwhelmed. And certainly you can't come up with all these answers overnight, but ask ourselves, what can we do about a particular situation? What opportunities are out there? Are there people we can talk to? If it doesn't exist, can we create it? Can we start something here? Can we brainstorm the possibilities? And what I can tell you is being open to being creative is been very important. There's lots of ways to use the same tool, right, as we have found. And I think talking to other families is the other thing I wanted to share here in this particular space. Christine, you asked about research. And talking to other families has been invaluable. It's one of the greatest resources I've found, especially talking to families with older children or disabilities. Being able to talk to other families, hear their stories, and learning about the tools they use. That helps me to be a better parent, to learn more, to pass on to other parents, and to be more informed professional in this field and support those who are working with families. And so it is you've said it lots of times here, that your voice is powerful. And I shared earlier, that's sort of how I got into this. Someone asked me, hey, could you come consult with us? Or, hey, we'd like to know your opinion. And then 20 plus years later, I'm still sharing my opinion. So I'm still sharing experiences, and now being in a space where you can connect and network other people, I think has been the probably the most important thing. Connecting with other parents and professionals who just will sit in that space with you.
Yes. And we thank you so much, Robin, because you have beautifully laid out some very practical, easy to implement things, because sometimes to think that you're going to have to create something and go learn something can be very, turn office-ish.
Yeah.
And so to be able to know that there are some practical things that you can do, and making the commitment to be in this summit was a good start.
Yeah.
And, as I say to everyone in the stream, and I see my team is doing a phenomenal job of keeping the conversation going. We're just reminding everybody, just reach out, introduce yourself on the stream, where you're from, say the name of your child's diagnosis, and if you're looking to connect with other parents, and just really begin to connect with one another like that. Because like you, Robin, while I do value the input of the professional, and I've gotten quite a bit of professional support, some of my greatest moments have been with other parents who have been there and they're able to encourage me. And when I had the conversation with you, Robin, and you told me that your beautiful son at 25 is working. I'm like, okay, so that's a possibility for Nathan. So, so it inspired me to keep on doing what I'm doing. And just like how I spoke to some parents in Dominica and their children are younger, when they hear that Nathan is in school, they're like, oh, so I'm inspired now to know that my child can move forward. So we need to be in the company of each other.
Yes.
And
Christine, there was a lady who taught me, she says, whenever your heart is beating really fast, you have something you want to say. And what's been coming to me listening to us is we're talking a lot about the physical. One of the things in my own life, I'm very present to is that as a human being, I am a grand design. And in that grand design, I have a spiritual and a mental and an emotional and a physical and a family and a social and a community and a global. And in the realm of the allness of who we are, I really would want to encourage our parents who are listening and watching to recognize the spiritual and emotional capacity, the wealth that you have to claim the results you want for your children. Sometimes your mind has to go ahead of the reality that is physically staring you in the face. And you have got to use that capacity to call into being the things that you require. And I can say without a doubt that working with Christine, I have seen how that can be operationalized. And I want to offer it to all the persons who are in tune with us this evening, that your spirit as a human being and your emotion as a human being, as a parent, you can use that faith, hope, and love that you have to ask, to claim, to require, to declare, and to say, I want and I need this, not because I am greedy, but because it is my right and it is my child's right. And I'm asking the universe to show me how I access. Ask, claim it. Use the spirit emotion aspect of your being to download some things that you have no idea where they are and how you will get to them. That's not for us to know all the time. We can claim things.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Because this summit, we sat under Elaine's mango tree. Santa, remember those mangoes? We sat under her mango tree 8 years ago. And in that moment, I was thinking about what wasn't present, what I was missing, what my son couldn't. I was thinking in that place. And she said to me, hold up a second. What do you want for your son? If you were to have the life that you have for him, what would that look like? And I couldn't tell her because I was so caught up in the what's missing.
Right.
That I missed the opportunity of thinking what is possible. And we sat under that tree and we talked about being able to bring in resource persons in Jamaica to train us. We talked about being able to have Nathan go to
That's
school.
how Center came.
That's how Center came. We talked about this summit of going global with the summit, and here we are today. So it is a practice that we actually live, and so we can demonstrate to you that we know it is something that works. And on that note, we are moving beautifully along. And so we're giving you a taste of all the little things, because next year we want to do some longer workshops that would be able to now walk through all of these, but we're giving you, spreading a table before you so you can taste of what is good. And so on the matter of taste, it is my pleasure to now invite into the conversation Dr. Raymond Hype. Dr. Ray.
Hello.
Welcome.
Dr. Ray. So I'm going to let Dr. Ray talk about himself and his work, but I just needed to introduce him to say this, that when Center connected me to Robin, and when I spoke with Robin sent me an email and I invited her into this conversation, and she sent me an email, and at the bottom of her email was a video link on sensory integration strategies. And I clicked on it and I met then Dr. Ray. And I watched the video, and in the moment, we were having some issues with Nathan, and just watching the video, short video, I recognized what was causing the trigger for Nathan. And so we now implemented some of what he shared. Dr. Ray, you didn't know that, into practice. And then I shared it with, with Sasha and asked her to share it with her wider group. And then Robin said, you know, there's a great gentleman who's doing some great work. And she sent me the information and we came across Dr. Ray. But just to let you know, he's a 30+ year veteran of administration and classroom for special students with special needs. He has designed many support programs for various schools and facilities. And his expertise is in assistive technology. And he has enabled, his expertise in assistive technology has enabled him to create updated approaches when working with students and educators. He currently works with schools and other institutions in classroom, sensory room, and specialized room design, as well as consulting on what assistive technology and sensory items might be most appropriate in various situations. And as usual, Dr. Ray also is the proud father of a young man with special needs. And so it is my pleasure to now invite you, Dr. Ray, into the conversation. How are you, sir?
I am doing well. Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here. I'm just amazed by what's gone on. I hope I can live up to Senta and Dr. Kathleen and Robin and Elaine, everything they've done so far. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So to kick off the conversation with you, we're asking you, Dr. Ray, what brought you to this place? How did you get to be where you are now?
So my story goes back to 1979. I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, so I became a volunteer teacher's aide. And I worked with a young man named Robbie in an after-school program. And forgive me, because I get emotional with all these things too. Robbie was autistic. Now you're saying, well, wait a minute, that's not person-centric. You know, you should have said autism spectrum. No, in 1979, there was no spectrum.
Right.
Autism was a single category, and it was a subcategory of schizophrenia. So we have come a long way in understanding so many things. So the first thing I've got to say to that parent who said, oh my goodness, my child is on the autism spectrum and it's my fault. No, don't believe that. We now know there are different environmental factors that go on. It is not you. You have been given a gift because you've been chosen as the person that can lead the way. So starting in 1979, I had this kind of connection and worked over the next few years then with some students, and I like to say differing abilities, not disabilities. Why? Because we're all different. And those things aren't necessarily restrictive in all areas. So worked in some specialized groups, then went into teaching. And then as I went on, I went into working with some of these special programs. And then, again, excuse me, but was very blessed and honored to bring my son in. Hugh, I know exactly what you're talking about, my friend, is being a father on the side of having an individual that has a diagnosis. And for my son, he is on the autism spectrum. As a father, we have a different view. People look at us and say, well, what are you going to do about it? It's like, well, we're going to love him and we're going to work with him and we're going to do the best we can. And so it is a pressure that goes into that. And going back to what Sasha had said too about, worried about issues in that we had the nonverbal side for a few years coming in, aside from other things. And that's an important thing. You have to work through that. You have to believe. You have to have those nights that you're up all night and you're crying and you're persevering. But the critical piece for every one of you is to remember hope. We love our children. We love them more than anything, but sometimes it's that hope that gets tested. Now, going back, Audrey, thank you so much for sharing what you had to share too. As your son's getting ready for high school, let me share with you. My son is already a sophomore at university. So guess what? There is amazing things that are coming down the road for your son. Are the kids always going to be helpful? Oh no, because you're absolutely right. That social engagement can be critical, but provide a platform. And that's why the social side needs to go out. And at some point in time, trust me, they will be able to move out and make a difference in the world. How do I know this? Robin's son, Gabe, is absolutely amazing. And you're going to see him as part of my presentation in a little bit because I rely on him for his insights. He has such phenomenal insights as we go in. And so that's kind of how I got my start and what brought me to where I'm at today.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Hype. And so where you are today as the, I'm looking back at your title, we're going to just ask you to tell us a little bit about, because there are two areas in your bio that speaks to sensory integration and assistive technology. What are those? Because for some people on the stream, they know that, but for many, we don't know what those are.
So when we talk about assistive technology, I'll start with that first. Some of our individuals need assistance doing activities that we would have normally done with our hands, perhaps, or our mouth on a daily basis. And so you might have individuals that need something like, and you'll have to forgive me, I do have props, something like this. This is a switch. So an individual that cannot interact with a digital device or even with a toy might have to use a switch of some type to interact. So assistive technology really basically is anything that will help an individual get through their daily life. Now, the beautiful thing is this, when we are in the community together, and this goes back to the idea of shame. Elaine, I'm going to keep coming back to that because that's an important thing we need to break down. But all too often people say, oh, your child needs assistive technology. That means there's something wrong with them. Not realizing that right now, you can't see the assistive technology that I'm using, although I know some of you are using it. Why? Because I have my contacts in. I don't have my glasses on. Guess what? By its very definition, contacts and glasses are assistive technology because they help me see. They help me drive. Well, I don't know if they actually help me drive or not, but at least they help me see. So that's one thing to be aware of. Assistive technologies are those devices that help us get through a day and do those daily activities, because sometimes we're restricted. We can't always do that. On the sensory side, what we need to understand is the whole notion that sensory processing occurs in every single human being. So that means this, all of us have different levels of sensory processing. You know, a little bit earlier, we heard about how, and I'm going to go back, sorry, in my notes here, because again, Senta and Dr. Kathleen, you guys were amazing. Going back to this all kinds of minds, guess what? There's all kinds of ways we interact with the world too. And because of that, all of us have some level of a sensory processing issue. And for those of you right now who are listening and say, well, I don't, maybe my child does. Oh, yes, you do. Because the question that I'd have you answer if we were face to face is, tell me about a kind of food that you don't like. The ironic thing is this, most people will give you that food, and then the reason that they don't like that food is not taste, it's texture. Oh, guess what that is, folks? It's a sensory processing issue. It's an issue, it's nothing big, but that allows us to shape things. But that goes into the idea of why we want to start talking about these sensory processing needs, because these are things that go on all the time. So as you can see, we've kind of moved into the title screen here. So Christine, let me throw it back to you before I kind of go on along this way. Oh.
No, you were doing well. We were just assisting you to get up your presentation. So you're in your presentation, so you have our attention.
Excellent. That's great. Now, the only question I have is, am I going to be able to move this presentation, or should I call up my screen?
So let me ask him to give you control.
Great. Thank you. And I will go ahead and click share screen.
Yeah.
Okay, it's still disabled at this point. Hang on, we're getting there.
It's
Outstanding.
done. It's done.
I,
Yes.
I want to thank the people doing this in the background. And let me just do this real quick. You will actually get into the slideshow. And so we're going to talk about this, and Robin knows me. I promise I will keep this under about 8 hours. I'm just so excited about this. I'm excited for all of you. I'm excited for your children because they are our future. And keep that in mind, keep that hope there, because here's the fact, they are our future. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's okay that we're going to hear things from society. We're going to talk about how we can address some of those. So let me get a little more in depth with this whole idea of sensory processing disorder. Basically, the brain isn't receiving or being able to respond to all the information coming in from our senses. We get inundated with it all the time. And we've come again to know so much more about this than we had. This was formerly known as sensory integration dysfunction. But here's what we have learned from science over the course of time. Everyone has these different levels of sensory processing. So it's not a dysfunction. It can't be a dysfunction if we've all got it. And so we've moved along. So it's not a standalone medical diagnosis. And it occurs in mild levels for everyone. But it is very highly individualized. And that's what we've got to remember, because there's no one size fits all. So as I go through this, there are some characteristics, and they're almost at different ends of a spectrum, if we use that. You could have those individuals that have high levels of oversensitivity and therefore extreme responses. Think about it, a loud noise or a bright light or something that's frightening, even a touch, that might trigger something because of that oversensitivity. But yet at the same time, and some of you as parents may have come to understand this too, it could be a lack of sensitivity where that child is putting their hand over a flame on a stove or on a fire and they're not feeling it. Or that child accidentally drops something on their foot and they don't feel it. So there is that lack of sensitivity that goes into that too. And for some of our individuals, it might result in a lack of coordination. They might bump into things a lot and not even know it. That is all part of sensory processing. What can we do as parents? First and foremost, you become the primary researcher. Now, I know you're sitting there going, well, we already have to become the advocate and we're the parent. Why do we have to be researcher? Here's why. You know best. You know best. You can identify what that cause is of whatever it is that's the trigger. No one else on the outside can do that. No one else on the outside is going to see what you see, is going to hear what you hear. But by becoming that primary researcher, guess what you're able to do? You're able to jot down a quick note. Responded to a loud noise. Doesn't like lights on sunny days. Doesn't do things. Why is that important? Because then you can share it with a professional. How many of us have ever been in the experience of waiting for an appointment to try and get to a professional, and only to go in there and they ask you questions that you don't have answers to? And then they say, well, find this out for me and then come back, 6 months or 8 months or a year down the road, because that's when you can get scheduled. If you have the information up front, guess what you're able to do right away? You're able to advocate, but you're also then that researcher. Oh, and most importantly, you're the parent. The next thing that you can do is to put yourself in that individual's place. What you say matters. I know you've heard that one a little bit before this evening. What you say does matter. Research has shown us this, that for a child, the word they hear the most by the time they're 2 years old is no. Imagine that. We start with that negativity, that restriction for every child by the time they're 2, that their parameters of what they can do have shrunk down. And for so many of our children, we see those parameters shrink down more. So instead of yelling when our child goes into that meltdown, why did they go into that meltdown? Ask that question. Look around, what goes on? And Elaine, this goes back to that idea of shame again. Unfortunately, that meltdown may happen in a grocery store. That meltdown may happen in a street. And guess what? People look at us sideways.
Yeah.
This is the toughest part we have to understand sometimes. Smile, nod, and then go back to dealing with your child. Do not feel as though you've got to grab that child and get them out of there. Why? Because that meltdown, that might just exacerbate, that might add more to that poor child because something is happening and we don't know what it is. The other thing you want to be aware of, and I have to give full credit to Robin for this, be prepared for all situations. So if that child has some type of an item that they've been using as kind of a sensory focus piece, always have a second one. Why? Because they might drop it, they might lose it. And if they lose it, that could also create, again, some type of a meltdown, some type of event where that child just doesn't understand. So by having a second one, then you can easily hand that to them and help calm them down. But the other thing I thought was so important is Senta and Dr. Kathleen talked, was to really just kind of get to understand that child. Look into their eyes. You look into their eyes as a parent every day. You can get a sense by looking in what that might be triggering that. Try and take them into environments that aren't going to have so many triggers and overwhelm them. If you start to see that your child is adverse to loud sounds, don't go somewhere where there's going to be sounds. You know, having to take them perhaps to a doctor's appointment, they'll have to hear the sounds of a city or the sounds of a road. But if you can stay away from those things and slowly acclimate them, that's a good thing. Also, an important thing, and this goes back to what we just talked about those long nights and that. Take time for yourself, even if it's 5 minutes, my friends. Take that time. Sit. Be thankful. Be grateful that you are there. Be grateful that you can move forward. Be grateful that you have 5 minutes where you can take a deep breath. Why is that important? Because you are that important advocate, researcher, parent, love of their life. You are all those things because there is no one size fits all solution. So what are some of the tools that we can use? And as I go through and I talk about some of these tools, please be aware. I'm going to talk about things that you could be using right at home right now. You don't have to say, well, how can I get out or get any of these things? There are some things you might already have, or some things you might be able to use right from around the home. And so we're going to be talking about these specific categories and how those can actually help individuals as they go through their daily lives. We hear a lot about weighted and compression items. We hear about weighted blankets a lot. We hear about weighted animals, weighted lap pads, compression vests. I've got my little friend here I'll bring out every once in a while. He's a little lizard. He weighs about 4.5 pounds. If you're using something that's weighted, please remember it should never be more than 1/10 of the individual's body weight. You know, I shared with Christine a story. I was working with some parents and they said, oh, we found the greatest weighted item. It's a weighted blanket. We got this for our child. She used to always fuss going to bed. We put this on her the first 2 nights she fussed, but she never moves in bed now. And she's just given up, you know, crying or all that. Well, although that sounded good, there was something that kind of triggered my mind. And so I asked them, I said, how much does your child weigh? They said, oh, she's this beautiful, 35-pound child. And I said, tell me about the blanket that you gave her. They said, oh, well, we got just an adult blanket because we felt that that'd be better for her. I said, how much does it weigh? They said, oh, it weighs about 60 pounds. I'm like, do you realize that the reason your child doesn't move at night is not because they're comfortable? It's because she would have to try and deadlift that blanket off of her. It's weighing too much on her. And they're like, is that why she doesn't cry anymore? I'm like, yes, it's almost as though in that case, she felt she was being punished. Now, the parents didn't know, but they didn't ask. It's that social network again. Please talk to other parents. Do weighted blankets work for some individuals? Yes. But what you want to recognize is this. Don't just go and say, oh, I'll just get whatever I can. Always talk through, think through. Why is it that weighted and compression items work? Let me share with you another beautiful thing. They work, and they work for all of us because of the fact that it goes back into the cells of our bodies. We all have cellular memory. And the safest and most secure time we ever had as individuals was when we were in the womb. And because of that idea of pressure, whenever we feel that pressure, we relax, even if but for a moment. But that's an important thing for our bodies. Did you ever wonder why when a child is born, after the doctors and nurses work, they wrap in a blanket? It's not just to keep warm. They swaddle. Why? To give that pressure. Because this world is a very unique world, especially in this day and age. So we want to make sure that that transition is a beautiful thing. So those are things to remember. Why do weighted items sometimes work? They work because it's that reminder. It's that safety that our body has felt before. Well, what can we do at home? Again, one of my favorite props are dried beans. I'll make a lot of soups and that with dried beans. So sometimes I'll have these lying around. This bag weighs about a pound. Guess what it can be? A nice weighted tool. It could be something you can put on the lap of a child. It could be something that if they just need a little something on their shoulders, you can put on the shoulders. And that could be a bag of rice. That could be something else that can just rest on there. I've had some individuals that have taken something like this, opened up the back of a favorite stuffed animal and put a bag in there. Why? Now it's added a little bit of weight. And now that individual feels that weight as they go through. What else can you use? You can use blankets. You know, why is it sometimes that our children will like to put blankets and pillows around and crawl underneath? Again, that's a secure place. Let them do that. Maybe have a blanket with you as you go out too, because that could be something while they're in a store. If they start crying or having that meltdown, pull the blanket out of your bag or out of the stroller and wrap it around them. And just give them a hug and say, it's okay. Say, I love you. And allow them to calm down because they may not be able to communicate what it is that's bothering them. The other thing I've got there are pillowcases. You could take pillowcases and put different items in there. I've seen groups, and one of the things that I like to recommend is if you have other sheets, just put other sheets in there. And that way a child can squeeze it and hold it, and you're not always having to take a pillow out. You're instead just taking some sheets out, and that child can have it and use it in multiple ways. But those are all items you might have around the house that can actually be helping you deal with things. Fidgets and sensory items. We hear about these different things all the time. And there's a lot of different things out there. Again, there's no one size fits all. And what you want to do is to try and find those things that are going to work for your child. But what we want to be aware of is something like this. So the thing that we've got on the top, that little green thing I've got here, this is called a boink. You can make one of these at home. There is a marble, and it's just inside a little bit of mesh. And it's just going to go back and forth, and you're able to hear my voice simply because it doesn't make sound. And it's something that can be in a hand, and it's something that can be under a desk or under a table. But when sensory items are being used and are being used well, it allows the body to do something, and that's release kinetic energy. If you haven't, up to this point, noticed, I am highly kinesthetic in everything I do. My hands move, my body moves. Robin can tell you right now, she's never seen me sit in one place while I'm speaking for this amount of time. And it is driving me crazy right now. That's why I've got to keep touching things as I go through. But again, that's part of what we do on the sensory side. So keep that in mind. What you want to be careful of and why there's no one size fits all. People will say different things like, oh, if they have a sensory ball or a squishy ball, that'll work great. Well, not if they throw it. And that's something you want to be aware of. So you've got students and individuals that will want to throw things. So don't give them something that would remind them to throw. Give them something, for example, one of my favorite items that's out there now, especially for individuals that like putting things in their mouth. This is called the roller chew. It's a little bit thicker than most of the jewelry or things like that. And what I mean by jewelry are little things like this. You can see my little bracelet here that a child could actually bite on. This is nice because they could bite on it, they could fidget with it. But if this string ever got caught, this is actually what they refer to as a breakaway string. It comes right off. So you're not worried about a choking hazard for the child. The other thing that I've got there is what's called a massage brush. And it actually looks like a toothbrush, but just with, instead of toothbrush bristles, it's got like almost like a little brush to move around the gums. Why? Because another issue that we have when it comes to daily activities is brushing teeth. So for some of our individuals, they may just need to have something that goes in there to begin to relax the mouth and get them used to that sensory feel. If you don't have something like that, that's fine. Use a soft bristle toothbrush, but only a little bit at a time. Just one brush. Then maybe move it up one side, then another side. But again, you're doing this over the course of days. We're training a behavior to go along with this. What are some things you have at home that you could be using? You could be using cornstarch and letting the students or the children put their hands in that. You could be using shaving cream. You could be using soap. Another one of my favorites. Now, this is not something that you would use with a student or a child that would put things in their mouth. This is a pencil grip. But what's great is when they go to school, if they're using this as a fidget, just something to play with, and their peers, and again, this goes back to the whole idea of shame, their peers, when they say, what is that? And they say pencil grip, their peers are like, oh, because a pencil grip is something we see in school. And therefore, it's not something that's separating them. It's not something that's moving away from them. So there are things that you can find around the home. Again, the bag of beans, put it into a bowl and let them move their hands through that as they're going through. Let them get sensory feedback. Warm water may work too very well. Let the child put their hands in for brief periods of time while you're teaching them how to wash their hands. Sensory items can also be used with fine motor. So there's a picture of Gabe. You already saw one picture of him from Robin a little bit earlier, but I'm going to highlight him again. These are all things that Gabe suggested to me that he felt worked well, because you could have them in a car, be traveling along with them, take them to a doctor's appointment, take them to any building you might be going into or an interview or anything of that nature, and be able to have something, this is a Tangle Junior, that's not going to make noise, that's going to give you the ability to release that kinetic energy coming out. That's what we're doing on the sensory side. That's what a meltdown is. A meltdown is that release of energy because our children don't know how to release that energy and they're trying to communicate to us. It might be that they are not happy in that environment. It could be something as simple as the heat or the coolness of a place. Trust me, right now, I'm coming to you from just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. If we were to walk outside right now to the 8 inches of snow that actually dropped today, I can assure you that anyone not wearing a jacket would not like the temperature. But sometimes it's even subtle changes in temperature that throw individuals off. Well, how do you explain that, especially if you're nonverbal? So those are some things to be aware of. Some of these other things, again, spiky balls, you might have some of these at home. If they work, they're getting more tactile feedback in their hands. The ironic thing is when we look at things that might already be at the home that could be used. All I have here is a stone. Some might call it a prayer stone. Some might call it a lucky stone. Some might call it just a relaxation stone. Something like that, though, can be something that we can hold in our hands. I carry this around with me. Why? Every once in a while, I just need to have something that I can release if I'm having to sit for long periods of time. Marbles, shoestring. This was one Gabe recommended. Just the roll from paper towels. Beautiful thing about something like this, aside from getting some feedback, you could actually cover one end with another one of my favorite tools. This is duct tape. You could cover one end and put some of those marbles in there, or put some of those beans in there, and have something, by covering up the other side, have something that also makes noise, or have something that has a little bit of weight. You also have seen games perhaps where you use something like clothespins, where you're trying to drop them into a bucket. So you're working on some fine motor skills there. You might even be working on just your fine motor pincer grip, trying to move around. But again, this is something that we can find that is not going to stand out and can give that sensory feedback that an individual needs as they go through. We hear a lot about sands and dough and putty. Please be careful. These don't always work for individuals. Sometimes they do, and that's wonderful. But things to be aware of. If, you know, and here's something, because people always say, oh, I hear that kinetic sand or sands, you know, some type of sand is going to work great. Not if the child or individual is adverse to that grittiness. Then it won't work. Then it'll be annoying. You know, there are some people, I know this is hard to believe, but there are some people that don't like going to the beach. Why? They don't like the feel of the sand. They love the water, but they don't like the sand. And that's okay. Again, all of us are beautiful individuals. We react in different ways. So what are some alternatives? There is a product out there, and it's the product that looks kind of whitish down there. It's called Sands Alive. It actually feels more like a moist earth instead of actually sand, and it can form, it can mold, and it cleans up. Sand and kinetic sand don't always clean up, and you'll find that in carpeting or on a floor for a long period of time. Another thing I really like is a product called Mad Matter. It's an alternative to the doughs that are out there. Why do I like it? First of all, it does not dry out. That means an individual can carry it with them. I have adults who will use Mad Matter in a workplace area. And these are adults that may have some cognitive issues going on. You know, perhaps they are within the range of being an individual with Down syndrome, but they're in a workplace. And having some of that there and just sitting it on the desk, people will come by and say, what's that? And they go, oh, my squeeze ball. And people go, okay, because it's acceptable. Why else do I like Mad Matter? Because of the fact that it was designed for a specific young lady in mind. And that young lady had some different issues going on when it came to allergies. So it's wheat-free, gluten-free, and casein-free. Because as parents, guess what we know and understand? It's not a matter of if our children will put that in their mouths. It's a matter of when they will put it in their mouths. So that's a good thing to know too. But you can also use some other putties that are out there too. So be aware of that those things are accessible to us. Exercise. Have our individuals doing some things. Have them do yoga. I know that sounds interesting. Why would you have a child do yoga? Even if you have a child who might be operating with some more physical constraints, they don't have to go through all the poses, but they can practice the breathing. And that's an important thing because that helps to calm down too. And guess what? As a parent, do it with them, model for them, let them know it's acceptable. Why? Because it's also helping you go through that. Exercise bands, sometimes we'll see that at the bottom of a wheelchair or the bottom of a chair for an individual to kick into to get feedback. That's great too, because then you can work with them to show them with that exercise band that they can move their arms. They could do some other exercises with it. That allows you to expand your social network too, because that's what we want to do. We want to come to a point where we've got other people giving us ideas. Have you tried this? It's okay to try things, but it's also okay when you as the advocate, you as the researcher, you as the expert, you as mom or dad turn around and say, yeah, we tried that, it doesn't work. It might work for your child though. That's okay to say too. You could be involved with anything that you got there and work with your children just to say it's okay to do this. It's okay to focus on breathing. It's okay if you have the ability to kick a ball, to go ahead and kick a ball. What we want them to do is get the sense that these are also sensory releases as we go through too. Seating. Oh my gosh, I'm sure you've heard so many people talk about, oh, well, you need specialized seating and you need this. No, you don't. You might have something that works well. You might have a cushion. I love this. This is called a bitty bottom because it's air adjustable. You don't need a fancy chair if you've got a cushion like this. And some of you may have cushions. Even pillows, excuse me, can operate as a cushion. Why? Because sometimes when we have an individual that needs to fidget, having that cushion there allows them to fidget, but they don't have to move their upper body, and yet they're still getting feedback. If you've got beanbag chairs, or you've got pillows that can fit the child and chair, you can, at that point, be able to have them get sensory feedback. So that's what you want to do. You want to recognize that this is there. This is the opportunity that you have. So there are things that are out there that allow for other types of seating in that. You know, some of us have exercise balls. I have to do this. I have to give a caveat. If you have an exercise ball, don't automatically think it's going to work perfectly for your child. Why? You need to make sure it's an exercise ball that's the correct size. Some exercise balls are so big that our little ones cannot put their feet on the floor and be sitting on it. We don't want that to happen because guess what? They'll fall over. The other thing you want to be aware of is if that individual doesn't have proper core strength, you don't necessarily want them on an exercise ball by themselves. Support them. Otherwise, they could fall over. But what you'll see is they'll start to move around a little bit, and that can help release some of the energy that we're going through. So be aware of those things as we go through. Other than that, too, and this goes back almost to the assistive technology side of things and sensory, be aware of environmental devices. You know, there are things that are out there, and you saw the switch that I had a little bit earlier. This is a movement sensor switch, trying to get our students to interact with things. Another important thing are timers, visual timers. Why are those important? Because visual timers actually let us know what's going on. They let us know that I'm probably over with my particular session here. So I'll need to shift back to Christine in just a second. But it allows us to actually see time because we don't always understand time. And something as simple as these are called vibes. These are earbuds that are noise reducing earbuds. So now instead of always having to have, if that child needs noise reduction or noise canceling, instead of always needing to have big headphones, you can have something that looks like all of their peers. So those are some things from the assistive technology side. I want to wrap things up. Please remember, folks, there's no one size fits all. It's okay if you try something and it doesn't work. That doesn't mean that there's no hope. It just means that there's something else that's out there. It will take some observation. You've got to be patient. Be patient with them, but most importantly, be patient with yourself. Recognize that when you're not patient with yourself, that's when you start to lose hope, and we can't do that. Reach out to a professional you can trust for support. Look at this network. Realize this, you're not alone. And when Christine has talked about professionals that you can reach out to, here's my contact information. Send me an email. Please, I'm more than happy. I will get back to you within 24 hours. There is no such thing as a silly question. There is no such thing as, no, I don't have time for you. Why? We are all in this together. We are all parents. We are all working with beautiful individuals. So, Christine, I thank you so much. I thank all of you parents for all that you're doing. And Senta, Dr. Kathleen, Robin, Elaine, you guys have been phenomenal. Thank you for what you've done to set this up as we've gone in. So Christine,
Thank
Back
you
to
so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Ray. I myself, as I told him, I need an appointment with him because I'm excited about some of the options that are there. And also, what it did for me in speaking with him last week, I began to realize that certain fidgetiness that I was seeing in Nathan and certain behaviors is because we used to do some of that when he was younger, and then we stopped. He's 16, but the needs are still there. So I was powerfully reminded of that. And so I wish we had time for questions because there have been a lot of things people have been saying, but we are
over time.
over time. So, you know, we hope that we can have a few minutes at the end of the afternoon for that. And so I just want to bring in now, is Dr. Gooden still there? Yes. Dr. Amy Gooden. And folks, I just want you to get that as I shared 8 years ago, I sat down and dreamed up the network that I needed for me, but I needed for the foundation. And all of these people have come in east, west, north, and south because I got a call from a woman some years ago. We were having an inclusive education conference, and she said, I teach at 2 universities in the States, and I have a number of Caribbean and Jamaican students who are in my class, and I teach in the special ed arena. And I asked, who is a mover and shaker in disabilities and special needs in Jamaica? And she said, everybody said Christine Stapley Banks and the Nathan Banks Foundation. And so she booked her way and came down to the conference to meet us. And we're getting ready to launch a training institute next year. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Amy Gooden into the conversation. She's passionate about the intersection of language, culture, and education. She has investigated cultural pluralism in Bree, Indigenous and Jamaica descent community in Costa Rica. She has also directed and conducted international English as a foreign language teacher training program for K-12 teachers in China. Her area of work at Lesley University, where she currently is a TESOL, TESOL, and bilingual education. She has an education ED from Boston University School of Education, and she has published quite a number of books. Some of them, you know, I wish we had time to get into, but I was having a conversation with Dr. Gooden because my family moved to the United States in summer, and I was sharing how the fact that my advocacy skill are still being employed as I am now learning, because here the systems are available, but you now have to navigate and advocate to have the systems be individualized for your child. And she said to me, so now can you imagine a family who don't speak English and they're not from the Western culture, how difficult it is for them to navigate the space. And so it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Gooden into the conversation to talk about those who might be listening on who are in multilingual, multicultural homes, and they have to navigate the education system for their child. So welcome, Dr. Gooden.
Thank you so much, Christine, and thank you, everyone. It is such a delight and an honor to be here, and I do remember that day that I was fortunate enough to attend the conference in Jamaica and the work with Senta and others, Elaine, and so it's such a joy to be here in this moment. And so it is a pleasure to speak tonight, in particular to the theme of elevating your voice and recognizing your power. And essentially, these are strategies and tips for multicultural and multilingual families. And before I begin with my presentation, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit more and what brought me to this work. So at Lesley University, I currently teach courses on intercultural and inclusive education, but looking at the intersection of language, culture, and education. So that is here in the US, we have students who are dual diagnosed. That means they are both English language learners as well as learners with cognitive and or physical disabilities. And so I help to prepare teachers on strategies to make learning more accessible and content more comprehensible. And so in addition to that, I teach sheltered English courses. Those are courses designed to equip teachers for working more positively and effectively with culturally and linguistically diverse families. So we know that here in the US context, we're incredibly pluralistic and multicultural, and it is incredibly important to make learning accessible to all. And so I kind of arrive at this work with the quote from the Bible where Matthew states, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters, you did for me." And so I've always been drawn to this quote and drawn in my own practice to want to help, quote unquote, the left behind, right? And so in my own life, I have a multicultural, multilingual background. My family's from Portugal. And so I got to see the benefits and riches of a multicultural, multilingual world, but also the challenges of navigating the educational system as a linguistic and cultural minority. My father's family is from Canada, so I had Canadian French and Portuguese, and it was interesting. So that's how I became passionate of, and I think that quote, by the way, encapsulates this conviction of prioritizing the idea that Dr. Help said that we need to celebrate people from all walks of the earth, from all abilities, from all colors, from all linguistic and cultural or ability, neurodiversity and backgrounds. And so I'm very passionate about the subject and very happy to share with parents some tips for navigating and being navigating part of their child's education, the US educational system, and being a true partner. Yes, and so I'll just stop with that and say that my recent book that is actually due tomorrow, it's called A Casebook of Inclusive Pedagogical Practice for Second Language Teacher Education. So again, I'm looking at inclusion from this cross-pollinated perspective of students who are either acculturating, even if English is their first language, as is the case with Christine and her family, there's still an acculturation process that intersects with everything else going on. And so these are the types of issues the book examines, or unpacking issues such as effectively communicating with multicultural and multilingual families, how teachers need to develop cultural humility and competence, that we have a problem in this country, I believe, and others. There needs to be a holistic assessment of learners, and we need to better distinguish between language-based, acculturation-based needs versus cognitive or physical disabilities. I've seen this book is a book of case studies from my own authentic experience. I worked as a consultant in public schools for the last 5 years, and I was always at the decision-making table for the IEP, whether or not it should be a referral for special education. And I brought the linguistic or the language-based lens. And I saw many decisions that were not made in the best interest of the children and families for various reasons. And so this is why I speak to you tonight. I want you to elevate your voice and recognize your power, because I've spent 2 decades helping teachers to know that it is the law of the land that everyone deserves the right to an equitable education. And right now in this pandemic, after George Floyd in the US, we've increased our focus on diversity and inclusion. And so I think it's been very sad for me to see families unsupported or their voices not elevated. And so tonight I want us to really emphasize the fact that you are a shared partner. If you think about your child's success, think of it as a triangle. You have the administration and the school structure at the top, perhaps, it doesn't matter the order. You have the teachers, but then there are the families. You are an equal partner in your child's education. In fact, you are your child's first teacher. Okay. And so I want us to arrive at school with that confidence, even if you're in a new place and you feel like Lawrence of Arabia, who says, how could I as me meet these new people? And how would I have to change? What of me was superficial and might be sacrificed? And what need I to remain myself? So that quote really encapsulates some of the changes that are natural part of adjusting to new surroundings. So for families who had made that transition to a new space, they should be aware of some of the biological and physical shifts, as well as adaptation to the new school context. And so moving on to, I guess, I'm not sure, Christine, if we'd like to show the slides. Yes, okay, you have them here. If we could just back up slightly. And one more, back up one more, thank you. Okay, move forward, sorry about that. Though the phrase I wanted on that last slide was culturally affirming approach. And I can say from my lens, because my job is to equip teachers and schools on what they should be doing for newcomers, is that schools are being trained in this phrase of affirming or strengths-based approaches. And they recognize that your voice is an indispensable component of decisions that impact your child's education. So that's the big picture. I want to now tailor, back to the questions. I want to tailor now my tips for parents. And instead of advice, I'm going to approach this in the form of 4 questions. And then we'll unpack these questions as the slides proceed. The first question that I'd like to ask you is, how engaged are you in your child's schooling? And what may be potential barriers that exist? Okay, this is question number 1 that will lead to the tip. And by the end of this workshop, I hope that you make a little plan for yourself, a short-term plan in response to these 4 questions. Okay, and I think this actually relates to all families of children, regardless of their backgrounds, culturally or linguistically, or in terms of the neurodiversity or abilities, right? These are just great tips for all. But in my field, especially for my immigrants, children and newcomers and refugees, this is so important. So number 1, how engaged are you in your child's schooling and what potential barriers exist? Research indicates that children whose parents are more engaged and involved tend to be more academically successful. However, there are barriers for newcomers. And Christine and I were just talking about some basic barriers all around that are pretty standard. One is the barrier of language. So if you happen to be a newcomer and are not proficient in the language of school, or even if you're in the Caribbean context in Jamaica right now, you may, the difference of having print literacy and oral literacy, maybe reading, these academic letters is still trying to you. So all of this still applies, is what can we do to break those language barriers? And I wanted to say that language should not be ever a barrier, because by law, if you have any discussions in the school, a translator should always be made available. And the translator, if the translator does not show up at a parent-teacher conference or at a special education referral or IEP meeting, then the parent has the right to, postpone the meeting until the school adheres to this policy. And I've seen situations where there was a Cape Verdean family. They speak Cape Verdean Creole, but the school didn't bother to care. They paid no mind. They had a Spanish translator. And they're like, oh, it's pretty similar. The languages are the same, no problem. And if I hadn't been there to highlight the critical language difference, the parent really, didn't speak up out of respect and perhaps lack of understanding of, the rights, essentially. And so we were able to postpone the meeting. Otherwise, decisions would not have been made in their language. So communication is so critical. How do you reach out to your school? Do you are you in terms of understanding the newsletters? There are many wonderful apps out there for translation, such as Say Hi. There is another app called Talking Point, and I'll share these resources with Christine. And in addition, many schools have family liaisons, folks or immigrant learning centers that actually are designed to support the acculturation process for all. So I want you to ask yourself, what is preventing you, if anything, from engaging in your child's schooling? If it's language, I just demystified that barrier. By law, schools need to help make everything comprehensible for the families. Newsletters must be translated. And so, in fact, many teachers in best practice should ask families their preferred mode of communication. For some families, perhaps it's WhatsApp versus email versus upon drop off and pickup. And so advocating with the teacher, not being shy because of linguistic differences, and understanding that your voice needs to be at the table. Also, how do you view your role as teachers and teachers' roles in different aspects of your child's schooling? We're going to speak about that a little bit further tonight, but there are cross-cultural differences that may impact aspects of your involvement that we should consider. Schools really need to value the family's funds of knowledge. I wrote an article co-authored with a colleague from Somalia. She's a refugee mother of a child with autism. And she has 5 children. She arrived to the United States after the war in Somalia. And with her youngest child, she felt very strongly that there was something else going on other than language, right? And so she went to the school, and the school just pushed back and just dismissed her, and actually rudely dismissed her. And she kept fighting. She kept fighting, and the school said, no, it's language. It's language. There's nothing else going on. And come to find out, the mother was a natural advocate, went to Boston Hospital, got her own evaluation, brought back to the school, and thanks to her advocacy, was able to get the types of early autism interventions that her child needed. But she was telling the school, I have 4 other children. They are also language learners. The development is not the same. And so my point being here is your role, you should recognize your role as incredibly crucial. I want you to remember the story of Sarah from Somalia. And had she not advocated, perhaps the child, and I've seen it in my end, because historically there has been a push to an over-representation of English language learners in special ed. But because that has occurred, now I see the pendulum swinging in the other direction, where there's almost a hesitation to diagnose. And so it's a complex issue that can only be resolved with everyone at the table. And you need to view your role as an equal partner, not less than, but as important. How familiar are you, by the way, number 3, with strategies for supporting your child's educational development at home? I think I try to demystify with parents that reading in English is the only way to help their child. Not true. In fact, reading in any language will help positively transfer the skills. So if you know how to summarize or make predictions in any language, then those skills can positively transfer to the new language, in this case, English. Audiobooks, a great way for you and your child to together develop academic English, because there's also a difference between social English and academic English. And in some ways, it takes 1 to 3 years to master social language whenever acquiring a new language. But academic English can take 5 to 7 years. right? And in cases of students with interrupted formal schooling, it can take 7 to 12, or coming from backgrounds like where there's a background of torture and trauma, it can take 7 to 12 years. So whatever you can do at home in terms of providing audiobooks, even showing, even writing grocery lists in any language, literacy exposure is great. And even oral storytelling. So whatever you do at home to advance literacy is powerful. There are also great after school programs. So we'll talk about strategies later on. But in terms of my talk's theme, in order to elevate your voice and recognize your power, you have to understand what are your rights. And I want to just harken back to in the US educational context, but I'm sure in many of the countries of folks who are online now. Well, here we have what's called the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which states that every single student has the right to equal, equitable educational opportunity. That there's no minced words there, right? And so if your child is not receiving the types of supports and services that you feel they need, you are backed up. There are policies in place to support you. And for those of you who come from multilingual families, there are a few policies from the 70s and 80s, Nichols and Lau and Castañeda versus Picard. Essentially, without getting into detail, by law, non-native English speakers are also by law expected to receive equal access to high quality education. So these are the 4 questions I want you to think about tonight that will lead to a plan for you, regardless of your language or cultural background. As I said, these questions just help all of us to be more effective partners with our children's schools so that we can navigate their academic success. So moving along to the next slide, and I'll be brief here. So a few kind of tips is try to build resilience. I've heard some wonderful tips from the various speakers tonight. So self-care is critical, taking breaks, I heard Dr. Help say as well. Building resilience, maybe creating a family advocacy group if there is none. Trying ways to keep your perseverance there. Then we want to think about navigating your child's success in the complex US educational process. Well, don't be afraid, educate yourself. There are so many resources that schools and districts provide, and I'll speak on that shortly. And we want to speak tonight about maybe coming from a different cultural orientation, there's some tension there between your expectations of the role of the school and the teachers and the families and the receiving school, the new the US expectation, so to speak, of the teachers and parents in schools. I hesitate to say US because for some of you it's Jamaica or Dominica, who knows, right? But regardless, it's this idea that sometimes there can be cross purposes and cross expectations. And some restorative justice conversations could help that, and we'll talk about it. So you want to foster a partnership with the school, try to demystify the process and affirm your voice. So let me give you some very specific details. Moving on to the next slide.
So,
And,
Dr. Gooden, I'm really loath to interrupt, but I'm just looking at our time, realizing that we have about 10 minutes.
10 minutes,
have to
okay.
wrap up at 8. Thank you.
Okay.
So much.
Thank you
So
kindly.
sorry.
I'll be brief. It's my pleasure. So I'll just wrap up with these 3 last slides, if that's okay. So I think empowering yourself first by understanding the differences in expectations between US culture and maybe a possible variation. US culture tends to be individualistic, while 90% of the world, so there are individualistic cultural orientations and collectivistic cultural orientations. So it can create issues in the classroom. For instance, in the US, we expect eye contact with the teacher, and perhaps in other cultural variation that could be considered as disrespectful. This could be due to understandings of hierarchy and rank, but in the US, we are more collaborative and active learning, while in other schooling context, students are expected to be quiet and listen respectfully and take notes. But in the US, students are expected to ask good questions, raise their hand, and be active. And so I think that it's important for us to equip our students with those, our children with those differences. Next slide, please. And teachers should be aware of this as well. Yep. And so, for instance, competition is valued. We have a lot of collaborative learning. Praise is rewarding. Students are expected to answer questions when called upon, and students learn by doing and hands-on activities. But perhaps a child coming from a different cultural orientation is accustomed to the exact opposite, where actually you don't speak unless you have something wise to say. Students learn by listening and reading. Students act for the good of the group and more cooperatively, and it's improper to act better than the other. Maybe demonstrating knowledge is showing off. So I just wanted to share those various cultural differences and help you to know this so you can perhaps empower your child and empower yourself. Next slide, and then I'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much. And so I would have spoken a little bit longer about the basics of the US classroom culture, but I'll just say briefly, we're very much focused on the individual. We say we are about differentiating instruction, which means looking at your whole child and assessing their whole needs and then providing support. It's important for you to know these things, because if you have this language, then you can arrive at the conversation at the school and say, you know, I don't feel instruction is being differentiated for my child. And so this is why language can be empowering as well. In the US classroom, we have student-centered learning. There's a lot of group work, and perhaps for kids accustomed to sitting in rows, it could feel off-putting, almost like silly play and games and not serious. So knowing this as families, again, can just help you to help your children to succeed much better. And the physical environment is different. Patterns of thinking and organizing. For instance, the way we organize essays. We tell you what we're going to tell you, we tell you, then we tell you what you told you. But in different cultural orientations, that's boring and so prescriptive. In French, the thesis comes at the end, right? In Chinese, writing is much more circular, and that's considered mysterious. So I just think it would be empowering to know, for example, the way that English is structured, so you can better read the newsletters. And there are so many resources in school. So I'll end with the resources because I know we're running out of time. But as I said, many schools provide English language support. So currently I'm working with a school district in Boston, and we're providing, it's an affinity and language development space for families, multilingual families, multicultural families. We have many Haitian, Jamaican families in the course. And so they're learning, developing their professional writing and English skills, and they're learning about strategies to help navigate their child's success in the school system. So that's not novel. The only problem I say is that at least in this context, we have each school district has different systems of support. So my best advice to you is, if you don't know, then you want to communicate and ask the school, reach out, find out what are the services for newcomers, and is there a family liaison? If you need translators, be very vocal about your needs, because at the end of the day, the schools want to support you, but they're so busy. So if you take the time to, overcome your barriers and build your resilience and become educated on the themes, then you can operate better as a full partner. And so I thank you really for your time. I wish I didn't have to rush through the end there, but we'll look forward to version 2.
Yes.
The bottom line is don't be afraid to elevate your voice. You are not alone. Your child's success is a shared responsibility, regardless of your linguistic or cultural or national background. It is a responsibility of you, the school, and the administration. So speak up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goodman. Yes, so people might be wondering, this come into the mix, but we have on the stream 18 countries. And we do have a number of people from the United States. We have the summit is being streamed through the Jamaica Northeast Diaspora platform. They're a partner, and that group has a very large community of West Indian families. And so we wanted, oftentimes it is said that we only focus on the children within the medical diagnosis of disability, but there are other special needs that are not being addressed. And so this was why we felt that it was important to bring in this dimension. The other thing is that for those of my Caribbean neighbors, what it's doing is laying out for you what you now need to go ask your system for. Because as I captured in chapter 9, You're Your Child's Greatest Advocacy, I called where we don't have all of the policies that may exist in the United States or other developed nation that would provide that kind of obligation of the system and the government to provide these kinds of support. Most all the countries of the world are signatory to the Child Rights Convention, and they are signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And if you want to get the attention of your education department, quote back those laws to them. So what we wanted you to do is to see what is happening elsewhere so you can begin to raise your voice, elevate your power, and agitate in your own situation to bring about the change that is needed for your family. So I'm going to ask Elaine to do some wrap up and thank yous. But before I do, I just want to call out some people. So we have a dream team of people from Jamaica, including Noneka, Shakira, Ricardo, Renee, who are the behind the scenes production kind of people. Then we have a United Nations online dream team of 15 persons from about, I think it's about 8 countries. We have Michelle from Ireland, Milou from Budapest. We have Liang from China, but she's in Australia. Niv from Bangladesh. We have Norura, I can't call some of the names. We have Henry, Kingsley Smith. Those are from the continent of Africa. We have Anis, Ferdinand, Gambi, Marion, Payal, Salwa, Samya. Those are some of the people who have been just doing a phenomenal job with the conversation, the chat, and just, bringing everybody together. And so I just wanted to call them out by name and to say, I know for some of them it's midnight, some of them it's early morning, but they're still on the stream and they have work a little bit later, bringing the support to give all of us access to this. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. So Elaine, I'm handing over to you.
And thank you so much, Christine, for bringing that up, because, behind the scenes sometimes is always fundamental for what is seen in front of the screen, because without those persons, it wouldn't be possible. We wouldn't be possible today. I don't want to wrap up without holding up this book and recommending that as many of you as possible get a copy of it. It's called How to Cope Parenting a Child with Special Needs. And of course, our author is Christine Stapley Banks. And the reason I'm holding this up is very quickly, I don't know how many of you are aware that this is called Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is something that was designed, came out of the United States, but has been affirmed by the United Nations Foundation. And we now have a period of 3 days, I think it's 5 days actually, following Thanksgiving Day, when you're asked to give back. And so I was asking Christine yesterday, all of this is available. All of the experts who have come on tonight, we have all offered our services free of cost. And Christine is providing, all of the people in the background are also donating their time. But within the donations, there are still costs. And so I said to her, you know, what do you need? So I've asked her to consider that. We're not going to stop to listen to that tonight because time is tight. But I know that she has a list that she has prepared. And part of it is to say that supporting the Nathan E. Banks Foundation is a very important giving back, because through the organizations, programs like these, where you have direct access to persons with skill sets and with knowledge base that you would not necessarily be able to access individually. So we want to thank the Nathan E. Banks Foundation and Raising Special Needs for the work that they are doing. But this work requires support. And I want you all to think about what is the way that you could provide some support for these organizations. And we want to have your feedback on this tomorrow and Thursday, because Giving Tuesday is a 5-day span post Thanksgiving, and it actually ends on December 3rd, which is the last day of our virtual parenting summit. So tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're going to be inviting you all to consider what it is that you can bring. It doesn't have to be monetary. It can be connections. It can be voluntary support. But we will be talking some more about the specifics of that Wednesday and Thursday. We certainly want to thank all of our presenters this evening for a very fulsome plate. It's impossible to really overemphasize the quality and the depth and the range of the information that we have accessed today. So we want to thank Senator Green. We want to thank Kathleen Van Antwerp. We want to thank Robin Ryan. We want to thank Dr. Raymond Hype. And of course, Dr. Amy Gooden. We want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening, and we're hoping that you will use your connections to pass on the word. You've asked what you can do to help. We need you to like and subscribe so you will get the notification when the event is coming on stream. We need you to check your email for your workbook. We want you to participate in sharing the event chat and in sending us emails with questions. We want you to like our Facebook page at NEF Jamaica and Raising Special Needs. And we want you to like our Instagram page at NEF Jamaica and Raising Special Needs. And of course, we want you to invite persons you know to go on site and look for this book. All the books are available on Amazon. There are 4 books. Talk more about them on Wednesday and Thursday. Help us to spread the word about this event. Recommend our speakers. They have provided themselves free of cost, but you can recommend them as speakers for events that you may be a part of. So that's it. We want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your questions. And remember, we are back on tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock, and we will be here as well on Thursday. Let's make the most of a spectacular opportunity for us to raise the consciousness around special needs, but most importantly, to bring ourselves fulsomely into the opportunity of serving our community, raising our children, loving each other, and being the powerful village and community that we have the opportunity to be. Any last words, Christine?
No, I could not top that. So thank you so much for so ably guiding us through the session today and for your continued commitment to the work. Thank
Absolutely. God bless you all. Have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful evening. Good night.
Night. Bye.
Yay, Nathan.
Cutie pie. So when you have a boss production team.
You understand? So are we off air? Let's check.
No, we're still live. He's taking us out.
Okay. Lovely.